call to order this workshop for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, July 18, 2023. Roll call. Oh, sorry, never mind, skip the roll call.
I'm ready.
Everyone's primed and ready. Roll call. So, Christina, I guess I will turn it over to you, and then you can turn it over to whomever you would like. How about that?
So this evening, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner, is going to present the concept of smart growth to the board. Ben?
Thank you, Christina and Madam Mayor, members of the board. Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. So, get this going through here. What is smart growth? So this is the official definition, so I'll just read that out here. Smart growth, or compact city urban densification, is an urban planning and transportation theory that focuses on walkable urban areas to prevent urban sprawl. It promotes compact, transit-oriented, socially diverse, walkable, and bicycle-friendly land use, including neighborhood schools, mixed-use development with a wide range of housing options. So basically, this is another way to think of that as sort of small-town America planning. Planners have taken many of the ideas of smart growth and incorporated them into what we've called smart code, which focuses on the design of structures rather than just only the land use as we see currently in our zoning. So there are certain principles with smart growth, and so I'll go ahead and read these off for you. There's 10 of them. So you have mixed land uses. We want to take advantage of compact building design, create a range of housing opportunities and choices, create walkable neighborhoods, foster distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place, preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environmental areas, strengthen and direct development towards the existing communities, provide a variety of transportation choices, make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and encourage community stakeholder collaboration in the development decisions. So I would like to emphasize and focus on the wide range of housing options. So we have a variety of housing choices for the citizens and future residents. Along with this is a need for predictable results, which can be harder to predict when certain aspects such as compact development are not directly regulated. There's also a benefit in terms of drainage systems and water quality. And for this aspect, I would like to turn the floor over to Kevin Moore, who can explain a little bit more about that. So, Kevin?
Thank you, Ben. Kevin Moore, City Engineer. One of the things this gives us the opportunity to do is to make the street pull its weight when drainage is concerned. So one of the issues we really see, even with detention and drainage improvements, is water quality suffering with development. And so the installation of streets and curbs and gutters and concrete storm sewers doesn't give the opportunity for grass and things like that to filter out some of the pollutants in the water. And so some of the things we can do, like you can see here on the left, they have built-in bioswales where the water would sink through the soil. They would use special soils for that, or trees planted along the edge of the street where water would drain in and then through the tree's root system and be filtered out that way. So there's some benefits there. We currently have these in our drainage criteria manual, but they're encouraged. They still wouldn't be required under this plan, but it would give the board and the city the opportunity to incentivize developers to use these within their development. So for just a couple of examples, you have here on the top left, pervious pavements through here, and it doesn't have to be the full width of the street. It can be just the edge of the lane to help give the water somewhere to filter through without running through the gutter. You also have, again, these planter boxes, and they can be used to offset the street or the pedestrian and building improvements. All that water can be filtered through there. It also doesn't require any high maintenance planting. So here you have an example of just a depressed green space that has all the drainage and everything underneath, but it doesn't require any extra maintenance from the standpoint of flowers and things being grown up like that. One of the comprehensive plan goals is to update the master street plan to include additional sections. Something like this might be an option, to use the median between two lanes for drainage, or bump outs along the edge for street diets. Things of that nature would be looked at as part of this plan. And I'll turn it over to Ben to discuss some more of the planning side of things, but kind of in the back of your head, I want you to think about how our goal is to bring a consultant in that would put together 8-10 plans or so that a developer could choose from and say, I would like to use this one on this property. And so we would ideally streamline the process, maybe waive fees depending on some of the selections that they make. Again, that would all be at the discretion of the board, but throughout this plan, the board would have input on what your goals are for development. And so I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Kevin. So looking at the key elements of smart growth, firstly, you want to look at compact, livable, walkable neighborhoods, which will attract people and businesses. These are critical to reduce sprawl or unmanaged growth. The concept looks at redevelopment or infill strategies to build out the urban center. Neighborhoods are close to services and schools, so they're made to be walk and bike friendly. Second element here is looking at pedestrian infrastructure like the new Woka Trail and applying this throughout the community, building off of the Dogwood Springs Trail. We are including dedicated sidewalks and side paths as part of the implementation of the city's section of the walk-bike plan, which has already been adopted. So this type of infrastructure is also a key component to smart growth practices and principles. Some other elements, I'll just read these off on the slide. It's obviously preserving open space and green belts when we can, create transparent, predictable, fair, and cost-effective rules for development, historic preservation, expansion within the city first, then with infill development, and then create workforce housing that is near jobs and reduce commuting times. Smart growth is sound for city budgets. Due to the compact growth patterns, the city is using already provided infrastructure to its maximum potential. So rather than 10 houses on a water line to the edge of town, you would look at taking that same water line, putting it into the center of town, and you can serve 100 houses off of that. So we're maximizing that public investment that we're already putting in our cities. So you can see also on here on the right some of the national statistics on the savings when using smart growth principles for planning cities, reduction in cost of roads, utilities, and schools. So what are some of the benefits of smart growth? Why is smart growth rather than just the business as usual model? Well, here's a list of 10 reasons why to consider this approach for city planning. First is predictable outcomes. If codes are made to foster smart growth, undesirable developments are less likely. Furthermore, from the private sector's perspective, there is less of a mystery as to what the city is looking for, so entitlements are predictable, taking some of the risk out of the development process, which is good for business. Retailers and businesses owners are attracted to this type of growth pattern due to increased foot traffic and visitors to the community. As I mentioned earlier, it maximizes public investment, more taps on a single utility line rather than miles of sewer and water lines to serve only a few houses on the edge of town. It increases the overall quality of life. People can walk and bike to places within the community spaces for parks, etc., that type of thing. This dovetails with attractive, well-designed neighborhoods, which sustain, if not increase, property values within the community. Part of this mix also needs to be looking at affordable housing, and by that we mean attainable housing for all income levels of the citizens. In other words, we do not want to price out people from the community. Attainable housing needs to be designed well, of high quality, and enhance the community aesthetic. As I said, the key is allowing a mix of housing types close to businesses and services. You may have heard planners refer to something called the missing middle, which means housing that is not single family or multifamily, but the middle density, which would be duplexes up to quadplexes, but designed to be to complement the neighborhood. So for instance, duplexes don't have to be side-by-side units. They can stack to resemble a single-family home from the outside curb view. Another item to consider is accessory dwelling units. These are sometimes called granny flats, which are additional dwelling unit added to a single-family lot, such as a small living quarter above a garage, something to that effect. Just so you know, we've fielded many calls from the citizens over the years requesting this type of thing in our community, which we don't currently allow. Smart growth's key aim is preservation of the small town character. I think everyone loves that Siloam Springs is a town that has a small town feel. It is walkable and areas are accessible to everyone. The planning works to preserve these historic growth patterns as the community continues to expand. The town is keeping its same DNA. Runaway, uncontrolled suburbanization can threaten the small town character if it's not done well with town planning principles. Smart growth allows for the healthier citizenry. This is due to the promotion of walkable neighborhoods, which gets more people out of their cars and allows people to interact with each other, such as meeting someone along the street as you walk. The key is building a safe environment for this, which includes building when you can to the human scale rather than to the car scale. So just as an example for that, if you think of the experience of walking along Highway 412 versus the experience of walking in the downtown, the businesses and the environment out on Highway 412 is built to the automobile or the car scale, and that's due to the width of the road, the setback of the buildings, the extensive parking lots, and that type of thing. It doesn't have a safest feeling for walking as you would in a more compact environment. So lastly, these principles provide safe places for play where kids can walk to their local school or to the park and not have any trouble with cars or getting hurt. So we wanted to look at a specific case study. So I've copied one here, one that we've recently approved in Siloam Springs called the Cove at Sager Creek. Some of you on the board might remember this project. This was implemented through a planned development or PD zone as a primary regulatory rule. This helps bring about smart growth practices. You can see the design of the development on the left. The yellow is single family. The brown along the street is the mixed use commercial. And the darker or the lighter brown up here is a facility for assisted living. We also have townhomes mixed in as well. So some of the key aspects to this is the alleyways, which allow streets, as you see shown in the pictures on the right. The streets layouts are walkable, built to the human scale, with plenty of natural preserved green space and water features. So how to implement this. This is another street grid example. This was actually done by a city staff person just to kind of illustrate how to apply the mixture of housing density within a compact area. This would represent a typical city block. And then you have the salmon color left as commercial uses with above-story apartments, similar to what we would see in the downtown. But it's not all that. You do have the parking hidden behind. You have an actual park. Then you have townhomes, which is the purple area. You have an alley. And then we do still have single-family homes as well with their rear yards. So people still have the private yards and green space in addition to the public park in the area. So this is just an example of what how this concept could be applied in an actual design. So here's just some photo examples. I like to put a lot of pictures in presentations just to give people an idea of what I'm talking about, like the old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So on the left here you see is this is from Smart Growth America's publication, just measuring sprawl. When we say urban sprawl, we're basically talking about what we're seeing on the left, essentially just a single use, only single family homes with not a lot of connectivity or any other things to go to other than just the houses themselves. Whereas on the right is more of a multi-uses, walkable neighbor community, really, using the smart growth practices. So, when we're talking about this, we're not just talking about building more downtowns. It's a mixture of everything. So this has the downtown aspects, but you do have the single family tied in as support communities around the downtown or higher density areas. So just showing this as a map layout. On the left here you see is the suburban street grid with the salmon color being all single family housing with not a lot of connectivity, just basically lots of cul-de-sacs coming off of a main road. And then on the right you have that same area but retrofitted to work with smart growth principles. So now we have a mixture of uses. We still have the single family, but we also have introduced commercial in there and some other higher density townhomes, that type of thing. You notice that the black dots here, or not dots, but really rectangles, are considered the building footprint. So the buildings are built right up to the road, and then the parking is actually hidden behind. So it has a very different feel than a typical like suburban setting. And of course you have a lot of green space and parks intermixed in there, and then you still have your single family as well. So it's sort of a not an either or, but a both and. And then I'm a big fan of what's called the urban transect. So this is me nerding out a little bit in urban planning here, but essentially this is kind of the DNA of a city and how you would break it out. So your urban transects are different densities. So you have the most dense area in the very center of town, and then as you work out concentric circles, you get less and less dense. So this is showing at the top, your typical downtown, and then you have an urban zone around that, your general urban zone, and then suburban, and then rural, and then natural. So you can see from the gray rectangles, that's the density, if you will, of how many buildings you have in that area, and then as you break it out, less and less as you get further out. And then, of course, the pictures at the bottom just showing you kind of what that actually looks like. So this is using the smart growth principles because they're putting the compact city within the center, and then you grow out less and less dense as you get further out until you preserve farmland on the periphery. So just going into what's next for Siloam Springs, and trying to bring this back home to our community and how we could fit this into us. So the first thing to consider is the possibility of hiring a consultant, as Kevin has mentioned, who can produce 5 to 10 different housing plans using the smart growth principles. The plans would be owned by the city, but could be given to developers if they were willing to use them. And these would also be pre-approved, which could mean that with some of the modifications, it would fit within the site, but the approval process would potentially stop with the planning commission or in some other way be streamlined to be quicker than what we're currently doing. The received plans would be either for free or at a modest fee but it would be a built-in incentive to the developer, cutting down on the design costs. The key would be that these designs are context sensitive, so everyone knows what they're getting. By context sensitive, we mean that the designs would be made to fit within their area where they're planned, so that land uses are not in conflict. For example, we would not want to plan a single-family residential home next to an industrial facility or auto-scaled big box store. You need to take the context and be sensitive to where it is. This approach also designates housing growth areas, potentially cutting down on land speculation and sprawled out developments. By having less intensive review process, approvals could be fast-tracked due to the plans already having been vetted by decision makers, whereas conventional developments would come through with the current review process and timetable that we're doing today. So another built-in incentive using the smart growth. Looking beyond just the preset plans, we would also look at making code amendments with smart growth principles in mind, using some cases of smart code or codes that would focus more on the form of the buildings rather than just only the land use, such as commercial versus residential. If there are specific housing types that are desired, the city could incentivize this by offering a reduction of fees or other incentives that could go along with that. And that, I believe, closes out the initial presentation. So Kevin and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So directors, questions?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Betsy.
this one might be for Kevin, but I don't know. I just know we talk about drainage a lot. The sidewalks, the grass, the filtration system, where does the water go from there?
Kevin Moore, city engineer. The sites would still need to be designed by a civil engineer. Really what they're getting with this process would be a plan development that a larger team would be involved in. So, for example, I believe we have the second reading of the PD tonight. Yes. So there's a plan development on the agenda tonight. It's the second reading. And that took several months of back and forth between staff and the developer to get something that everybody was happy with. Plan development is a little bit of a give and take. So they are allowed to compromise on things like lot line setbacks. And in exchange, we're saying the city wants a public park or some sort of amenity. And so this would streamline that portion of the process. And then a civil engineer would still be needed to make sure to customize the drainage and grading to the site. But the plan itself would be pre-approved densities and uses and things like that.
Yeah, I was just curious, since drainage is an issue, like where the water goes once it gets through. But I guess that would be determined given the situation.
Yeah, it would still be a fairly normal drainage system, but that first interaction between the surface water and our drainage system would be a grassed area that's capable of filtering out some of the pollutants.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
you sort of started to answer this question, I think. How have we already, if at all, implemented some of the smart growth principles with recent developments? And you just talked about the plan development that's on a second reading tonight. Are there other examples where we've done something like that? You gave the example of the cove at Sager Creek.
I was going to say the cove at Sager Creek.
So those are the ones that you're kind of.
They're the main ones, yeah. That
Okay.
I would say fairly implements smart growth.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then, so I don't know if this is a question that you can answer tonight or not, but, oftentimes we hear from citizens if they're in a single family neighborhood and there are duplexes going nearby, they're concerned, or smaller houses or just different houses, they're concerned about their property values. In a planned development where the plan from the beginning is to have the multi-use homes, what does that do to property values, if anything?
They tend to go up.
Go up?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
people want to live in these types of neighborhoods.
Okay.
Mhm.
Harbor Meadows sort of reminds me of what you're talking about too, except I don't know that they have the multifamily homes over there. But I know they have lots of varying sizes of homes.
In fact, one of the pictures was Harbor Meadows in the presentation.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So
you.
that's a good example as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that seems to have worked pretty well, and it is hard to get a house in there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Carol.
So, Ben, is this almost building community within the community?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it. It's building neighborhoods that have a strong sense of community where people would walk to. I don't want to sound corny, but it sounds like kind of like go walk to the village green, and have common gathering places, and you kind of do that by building in amenities and a mixture of land uses. People will walk if there's something to walk to. And so I think that's kind of partly what this concept is doing, and that by having people interact with each other in communities and small neighborhoods, it builds a stronger overall community.
So how does Siloam Springs achieve this with the codes that we're already using, and we don't really have that community effort, I don't think. I mean, we have neighborhoods, but we don't have retail and neighborhoods all mixed together. So how do we overcome that and go towards this direction?
It can be done. It takes a lot of effort. I mentioned smart codes. So there's something that's called form-based codes. I don't know if you guys have heard that or not. So not to get too technical, but we have a zoning code. It's called Euclidean zoning. Euclidean zoning is what we have right now. And that's from a town called Euclid, Ohio, that won the chance in 1927 to say that cities had the right to zone. So it used to be that people didn't feel like cities could say what you could do or not do on your property, but they took it to Supreme Court and they won. Well, because of that land case, that type of zoning that was prevalent at that time became Euclidean zoning, and that's why we have that here. What that zoning does is it focuses almost exclusively on land use. So you're looking at, is it a house? Is it a business? Is it an industrial facility? Is it a church? And that's really it. And so what that does, it doesn't give you a lot of predictable results. You say, oh, it's a residential subdivision, but it could be designed 1,000 different ways and still meet the land use side. So what form-based code kind of puts that on its head, it still looks at use, but it makes that much smaller. Instead looks at the form. It's like, what is the building actually going to look like? We're going to regulate basically kind of take the DNA of a neighborhood and say that is the regulation. So you would, rather than having a setback, you have a build to line where you actually require to build up to a certain point. So all the houses line up perfectly and they're not higgly-jiggly across the neighborhoods. So that's kind of what we would do. Some cities have done what's called hybrid codes, where they take the current zoning and they mix in the form-based codes into that to try to create kind of a hybrid for specialized districts. So like they want to look at just like the downtown, or they want to look at just a historic neighborhood, for instance, or something like that. So there's many different options. It just depends on what the city wants to do.
Has this been presented to the Planning Commission?
We invited the Planning Commission to this meeting.
Did you
Yeah.
really? Because I had a
Yeah.
Planning Commission member call me. I wanted to know if they could come.
Yeah, I mentioned it at the last meeting that this was open. Yeah, did I not? Yeah. Okay.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got one representative.
I like this idea.
Mhm.
I've been on the Planning Commission. I kind of have a little bit of an idea, but I think I like a community within a community.
Mhm.
But it seems like it would be very difficult to achieve, to change everything that we have.
It will be a many year-long process. So you can't just snap your fingers and get it tomorrow. It's going to take efforts to update the codes and do a lot of work to get that to.
Well, I think
you
you'd
know.
also have to educate your developers that you're,
Mhm. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Madam Mayor,
So, yes, Betsy, and then David to you.
thank you. My second question is, so there are a lot of great ideas in here, and Mindy expressed what I was going to say to some extent about mixed use. I think that's something we have to be careful with.
Mhm.
I know in some parts of the country, they're trying to put apartments and duplexes and low-income housing into suburban areas. To me, that's not an okay thing. Would this want to go into already established areas and start doing some of that?
Well, I think a lot of it, what you're talking about is developments that are poorly designed. So it's not the use, it's the design. So, I mean, there's some specifics to that. So, you know, you can have duplexes that don't look like a side-by-side garage with a 40-foot wide driveway.
Right.
You know, you can have a duplex that looks like a single-family house, and the second unit is hidden back behind, and no one would know any different
Yeah.
walking down the street. So it's typically what I think you're talking about is bad, poorly designed developments that are being shoehorned into other suburban areas, and that's not working for the community. And I don't think that's what smart growth is about.
Because
Yeah.
I would just, like putting some of these in like next to an estate
Mhm.
home or things like that. It just seems like we'd have to be really careful with the zoning and what went in, especially in areas that are already established.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I would agree with you, absolutely. Yeah.
David?
Mayor, thank you, Ben. Just to pass on to Parks, this is a really cool, I wish we had done something to Sager Creek with this where it gets smaller. The way it zigzags, it's just a cool look. You like that, Kevin? It's pretty neat. I just, for a place where water is what I'm saying, a water feature or whatever you're talking about. I just had a question. You had put the Cove at Siloam Spring or Sager Creek. Is it still going in? Because I thought I saw for sale signs up, and I know that was like an ideal whole project plan. And
I know, I loved it. I don't know if it's going in or not. I have not heard from the developer. They just zoned it, if you remember. They never came back with the actual
Yeah.
development plans.
Yeah.
So if
But
someone,
we had seen this. We
Yeah.
had seen this when it was being rezoned. Yeah.
yeah, well, the beauty of the PD zone is if someone does buy it, they're tied to that design, right?
I just didn't know. I had hoped it would because it would have been like the first really obvious. What I was going to suggest is you had said this is going to take a lot of work, possibly with the annexation. You've got all this bare land. I mean, you can't make a developer, but then again, maybe you can kind of push or encourage the community within the community or within the city limits. Because, I mean, that's an awful lot of land that hopefully will pass the public. And you could certainly say, well, let's plop it down right there, that new community with all these different zonings in one area. I think it's always, no matter what, your developer's going to look at how much money he can make. He or she is going to be wanting to get the biggest bang for their buck. This picture here, of course, shows a lot of how it is across America. This one, I don't see a lot of single-family homes around it. It's got more of that downtown look with a park. But I guess you could have the single-family homes around the area.
Yeah, I'll go back to that one. It's kind of hard to see, but
This is a better look of
Yeah.
what you were trying to portray. Right?
Yeah.
With the differentiation.
it like the
This is more like this.
yes, exactly. And the picture on the right, and the very, very back, the very last street, those are single-family homes. Makes sense. Yeah, so it's kind of like your typical small town Americana kind of look. You have the town square, and you have the buildings around that, and then you have the little smaller houses around the edge, the kind of neighborhoods or communities our grandparents grew up in, that kind of thing.
Of course,
So
the one on the left is surrounded by a golf course, so it's really apples and oranges.
it's totally different. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this here is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really helpful picture of how things advance over time to become more urban.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I just think you may have to look at that future annexation as a place to experiment or shoot for
Absolutely.
something like this
Madam Mayor?
because it's undeveloped right now.
Yes, Mindy.
I just have a point of clarification based on some of the questions that have been asked. So if the city were to go more toward a smart growth plan, would it be that's the direction we would go and that's how all the codes would be changed to be effective for that smart growth, or would it sort of be an either or? So there might be some sections in town with some sort of planned use plan that would be for this is where we want this kind of planned development, but there may be other parts of town near the established estates or whatever that would be more the current. A developer comes in and wants to do what they want to do, but they can do that there, but maybe the city has decided over here it needs to be more something like this.
Yeah, great question. Well, our approach was never to be draconian and change everything overnight.
Right.
We're realistic there. We understand that people don't necessarily want to buy in all this. So our approach is carrots, not sticks. So we want to do incentives, make it easier to do this type of smart growth. But if a developer wanted to do conventional development, we're not going to tell them no, as long as it was
either or, not
Yeah.
this is how you have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a both and. It's saying we can still have the Castlewoods of the world, come in and do that, but we're going to make it a little bit easier if somebody wanted to do this smart growth style, just because maybe they'll take it up and actually we would develop better like that. That's the staff's approach. Now cities can take this in an entire spectrum. They could say, well, no, we want to actually change all our codes and make this more of a requirement, and that would be the most extreme. We could go anywhere along that spectrum. So
So codes may have to change some, but there may be codes that are dependent on which way you go.
Right, and that would be like the hybrid codes, where hybrids are where you have the Euclidean zoning still, but you also have the smart growth built in on different districts, that kind of thing. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
I think anything where you use the word smartphone, smart home, everything starts small and then it eventually becomes adopted by everyone. It just takes a while to get there. So.
Lisa?
So you talk to a lot of developers. Have you ever had the discussion on smart growth with any of them, and how is it perceived here by our developers, if you have?
That's a good question. We've had developers come to us already wanting to do this type of thing, so we don't necessarily push that. We have the best example I can think of is actually the PD development that's off of Country Club right now. I think that's on its second reading. That started out vastly different than what the final product is that came through.
Pickleball court?
Yes, at the pickleball court, yeah. And with that, we were applying, we were visiting with them, say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? This might go a little bit better. And while we didn't get 100% of everything we wanted, the developer did change their design, and I think for the better. And that was really using these smart growth principles, as part of the conversation that we had with them. So
But some of those extra things that they're putting in there, I bet those homes go like hotcakes.
Yeah.
Just because they're different.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole neighborhood will be different.
yeah.
Anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Reed.
thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Anyone else? Lisa?
I didn't tell you thank you, but thank you for putting this together. And I wasn't trying to be rude, but I can't read what you wrote unless I have my glasses.
Oh, no, you're fine.
That's why I had to step out.
I might ask this, if I'm not mistaken, and Renee just asked me that, is there not a community that is getting ready to do a big project, rather taking the smart growth plan that's actually being funded, partially funded by the Walton Family Foundation because of the...
Well, yes, there was the one in Springdale, the housing, I don't remember what they call that, the Big Emma or something?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and...
similar to what this is?
Yes, I think, it's hard to say, one development is all of smart growth. It's more of think of it as a theory of practice. You have certain ground rules you're working with. And when you develop, you take things like compact development, density, access to green space, services, you play that all in, and you do get a development that follows along those guidelines. So essentially, it's just really just looking at development through a different lens. I think right now we're so focused on suburban development on the edge of town, and that's what we're getting. And I think, there's another option, and I think that's just really what smart growth is to provide another option for the community to look into. So,
Over in Fayetteville, off of 16, as you approach the big highway, they've built some townhomes right on the main, and I mean they're nice, 2-story, very close together, but a good size yard, just enough, and a nice fenced yard. And right around the corner is single family, regular. I think those neighborhoods probably were already there. And then down the road's a new school, and down the road's a new retirement place. And so it kind of looks like they've planned a little smart planning.
yeah.
I wondered though, because the boulevard that they put the townhomes, I would have thought would have been saved for commercial, but just up at the intersection's a lot of commercial already.
Yeah.
Across the street, there's nothing, so I think they're gonna plan that for commercial.
Yeah, and the key is making it walkable.
Yeah.
And I think what I really want to get across with the presentation is don't be afraid of density. Density is not a bad thing. It can be done well and fit into neighborhoods. I mean, I remember the case, 3 or 4 years ago now, where they were putting townhomes out on Mount Olive. I think it was Mount Olive and Helena, and the neighborhood all came out against it. Well, we can't have apartments next to us. Well, if it was designed well, it would have fit in perfectly fine and probably would have increased the property values, not decreased. It's just the question is it being designed thoughtfully with these smart growth principles in mind, as quality infill to that area? And the key is quality. You want to have something that the community is proud of. So,
Ben, how would this work with infill, building on the infill lots? Is that possible with this?
yes, I think this is exactly pushing infill. I mean, that's the concept is compact development, where you build interior first and then you build outside. Now, I know we're about to do a big annexation, but that is looking at this community 20 to 30 years down the road as all that infill fills up and there isn't anything left in the existing community. And so you have to kind of grow out.
You have some
Yeah.
lots that are within this area here that aren't built on.
Yeah. And then making sure that what gets built on there fits within that neighborhood, and that context-sensitive design. Going back, you want to make sure you're sensitive to your environment and not building something that just doesn't fit.
Thank you.
Now, those townhomes I mentioned in Fayetteville are right next to each other. I mean, there's probably 20 in what you would have thought 10 years ago was only 15, space for 15. And, it's appealing to a different kind of buyer, and they love it. I mean, they all went really fast, and they're cool looking. They almost remind you of San Francisco, where they have the townhomes that are different color, and each one has its own personality. And so, yeah.
I'll be disappointed if the Cove doesn't end up coming to pass, because that was going to be a very good opportunity for senior housing with the kind of our transitional housing options there. So hopefully we can, maybe even if we have this consultant do up some designs, they could design one that was specifically geared toward seniors. We just don't have a lot of opportunities.
That was a big selling point, I think.
It really was.
How,
It
how
really
that's going to
was.
be one of the key new ones for people to look at.
Well, a lot of them over in Fayetteville now are having retail on the bottom,
Oh.
and then the apartments, which appeals to my age. And I think a lot of others that are senior. So I would like to see some of that too.
Johnson Square is a good example too of smart growth. If you know where the Inn at the Mill, you go down there.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a neat area back there.
Well, all right. Then, Ben, Kevin, thank you all very much for your presentation. I'm sure the board looks forward to hearing more from you.
Yes.
And if we have nothing else, workshop is adjourned. We will convene at 6:30 for our regular board meeting. Call to order the Siloam Springs Board of Directors meeting for July 18, 2023. Roll call.
Blair.
Here.
Smiley.
Here.
Wiles.
Here.
Hunt,
Here.
Rissler.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
At this time, if you will please stand with me as Director Carroll leads us in prayer. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, tonight we give thanks for the opportunity to come together in your name, to make wise decisions, wise choices for the city of Siloam Springs, and that we may have opportunity to get to know you even better. And that as we do, we can know good from bad, truth from lie. We can rely on you. We thank you for this opportunity. We can do this in courage and in the wisdom that you've given to us. In Jesus' name.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, I would like to ask anyone that has an electronic device to please silence that or turn that off so that we don't have any interruptions during the meeting. And thank you for that. Next is our public input. Is there anyone that would like to address the board on any item that is not on our regular agenda? Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Board. Arthur Holbert, 20705 Highway 16, Siloam Springs. I was going to use this time basically to give my quarterly report and kind of give a game plan of what we got going on in the future.
That's our next, that's on our next agenda. All three of the nonprofits are on the next agenda, August 1st.
All right, well, I'm still going to give my public comment right now, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. And also, in alignment with our pro-life designation for the city of Siloam Springs, I do want to invite everyone on the board and the general public too. We're going to do a Safe Haven baby box dedication. That will be this coming Sunday, 7/23. Ribbon cutting will be at 2 o'clock, and we'll have food at 1 p.m. So Safe Haven baby box dedication in accordance with Siloam Springs pro-life designation. So I'll go ahead and do my real quick. Basically, last quarter, you guys have the reports. We've done multiple RFIs. There's a lot of businesses still considering coming to Siloam Springs, and we're working with those diligently. We've done some HR roundtables. There's still opportunity for about 20 available CDL free licenses so people can get CDL training for free. And we did our Dogwood Festival, working with the Western Benton County Partnership on the board chair of that. We're working on broadband. There's been $1 billion given to Arkansas on that. I'm on that committee. Also infrastructure, childcare, workforce. We've done Fourth Fridays this last quarter, and back to school breakfast, golf tournament on September 15th coming around the corner. We're doing a very large women's conference in November. We're going to give away about $10,000 for a business competition this December, the chamber is. One thing I'm very proud of, we're doing a gigantic hiring event at Silent Springs Public Schools. So every high school senior in Silent Springs, and right now 6 surrounding schools will be in Silent Springs, probably 1,000 seniors. That'll be in March. And so far we've got Silent Springs, Gentry, Decatur, Gravette, Sulphur Springs, Candace, and also Concord. We're working on several other schools join, but so far we have 7 superintendents have signed on to that to have all their high school kids in Silent Springs, and the businesses will be here. It'll be a hiring event. Goal would love to be to see 100 kids get offered a job. Makerspace, we've got the largest 3D printer, as I understand, in the state of Arkansas now. We're working on building a turbine there, generating hopefully some electricity. We've done a lot of Hispanic outreach, and we gave $1,000 for the robotics team. Silent Springs had some teenagers do the robotics team, they represented the entire state of Arkansas here from Silent Springs, and they got some awards. And we were fortunate they used the makerspace for that. We were able to give them some money. We did some lunch and learns, a lot of great things going on. And that about wraps up my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. Is there anyone else? If not, is there anyone that would like to address the board on any item that is on our consent agenda? There is none. So we will move on to our I'm sorry.
You just told me you need to do a presentation.
We'll move on to our presentations. The introduction of new firefighters, Chief Kreiner.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Jeremy Kreiner, Fire Chief. I'm, again, once honored and privileged to be up here as the Chief of the Department, introducing some new firefighters. This group is smaller than the last, but certainly not less impressive by any means. So I'll introduce them. Dakota Main, to my right. Dakota comes to us from the Springdale area. Ashlyn Andreg, she comes to us from Bella Vista. She previously worked for another department and actually just recently completed her paramedic training. To my left is Rachel Norwood. She's a Siloam Springs native. Following that is Elliot Blair, comes to us from the Fort Worth area, has been in Siloam Springs for about a year. And then to his far left is John Turley, is also a Siloam Springs native and is also currently in the United States Marine Corps. So with that, we are extremely excited. We do have one more that hasn't been able to make it. He's currently on shift today, but is out running emergency incidents, so unable to be with us in the board meeting. But it's my privilege again to introduce them and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I bet you're getting more recruits because so many of them keep getting introduced on public TV right here.
Superstars.
They want to be a celebrity. Yeah, that's great. We're really proud, Chief, that so many talented people are coming to be Siloam Springs Fire Department employees.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. We appreciate each one and every one of you. We look forward to many years with you all being here with us. So thank you very much for what you are doing for our citizens.
I always love to see Siloam natives, but those who become new Siloam Springsters, I'm always pleased for that too. So thank you, Chief.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
So with that, we will now move on to our consent agenda. The first item, item A, is the regular meeting minutes from July 5, 2023. There was a Scrivener's error that was found on item P for the resolution 40-23. It was shown as motion passed 6-1 with 1 no vote. And then there was also a line that stated motion passed unanimously. That line has been removed. So, Director, so you are aware that that has been changed. Next is item B, special called minutes, July 10, 2023. Item C, dedication of utility easements, 3900 block of Highway 412 East. Item D, purchase Public Works Department, Water Services Division, 2023 Kubota Combat Track Loader from Springdale Tractor for $175,000. Item E, budget amendment, Public Works Department, Maintenance Division, engine diagnostic device for $15,144.98. Item F, budget amendment, Public Works Department, Maintenance Division, air conditioner recharging machine for $7,500. Item G, dedication of access easement 2400 to 2600 block of East Kenwood Street. Item H, budget amendment, finance, fuel farm upgrades for $52,161.91. Directors, comments or questions, or anything that you would like removed from the consent agenda for further discussion? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next is our regularly scheduled items. Ordinance 23-17 on its second reading, amending Section 102-21 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from A1 to C2, the 400 block of North Progress Avenue. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. Before you is the second reading for the rezone of property at the 400 block of North Progress Avenue. The request is going from A1 to C2, so this will fill out the lot under the same zoning, which has a split zoning currently. Since the last reading, staff has not received any additional comments on the request. Staff and the Planning Commission continue to recommend approval, and we're available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, any comments or questions for Ben? If none, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 23-17? There being none, I will come back to the board. I would like to tell you that we did receive a request from the owner for consideration of the second and third reading of this ordinance. So I would ask if I have a motion to place this on its second and third reading, suspending the rules, reading title only.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Abstain?
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Christina?
Ordinance number 23-17, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from A1 to C2, property located at the 400 block of North Progress Avenue.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt Ordinance 23-17?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt. Roll call.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Abstain?
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Ordinance 23-17 is adopted. Next is Ordinance 23-18, second reading, amending Section 102-21 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from R2 to PD, the 2600 block of North Country Club Road. Megan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Megan Thomas, Planner 1. This is the second reading for a rezoning request located at the 2600 block of North Country Club Road. As a reminder, the applicant is requesting to rezone 13.59 acres from R2 residential medium to PD planned development in order to allow for a zero lot line townhome concept. Staff is still recommending approval of this request with no needed conditions, and staff is available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, David?
Megan, did you say that they plan to, you said to, what did you say they plan to do? To annex?
No, it's a rezoning request for 13.59 acres. It's going from R2 to PD planned development.
Okay.
The concept plan was presented at the last board meeting.
I knew we were doing that, but I didn't know. It's already in the city limits, right? Isn't it? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 23-18? Please state your name and address for the record.
Misty Stevens, 1701 Villa View Drive. I'm the agent for the owner and developer of the project, and I'd like to request to combine the second and third readings and have the board make a motion to approve tonight. Final reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Misty. Is there anyone else? If not, directors, do I have a motion to place this ordinance 23-18 on its second and third reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Christina?
Ordinance number 23-18, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from R2 to PD, property located at the 2600 block of North Country Club Road.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt ordinance 23-18?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Ordinance 23-18 is adopted. Next is ordinance 23-19, first reading, annexation election. Ben?
We get the PowerPoint up. All right, there we go. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Board. Ben Rhodes again. So following up from the board workshop held with you on June the 6th, staff is coming back to you to present the annexation through election ordinance. As a reminder, this ordinance allows for annexation, as you can see displayed, to put Siloam Springs electorate as well as registered voters in the annexation area to vote on a ballot measure for this November's general election. As you see, the map has expanded somewhat from when we originally presented this to you last month. The new total acreage is 2,860, which has increased by 571 acres from what was presented to you last time. For some context, this proposal is still 78.5% smaller than what was proposed with the 2008 annexation, which I will cover the specifics on the areas we've added later on in this presentation. So this slide shows you the utility district set against the planned annexation area. The red line is the electric service boundary, and the lighter blue is the water district boundary. The water boundary covers all the area to the north, and you can see that dashed blue line here on the right. That's kind of hard to make out, but it comes up that way. So as I mentioned, I'm zooming into the map so you can see the areas in greater detail. You're looking at the northwestern quadrant of the city and the annexation area. So we heard you that you wanted to take in both sides of Villaview Drive. So no part of that street along the northern side is outside of the city at this point with the proposal. The rest going to north remains the same with the exception of taking in both sides of Davidson Road, which I'm going to point out right here. That's been added from what you were presented with last time. We are not taking in the area that was subject to the recent annexation review for the Oakbrook subdivision, which is down in here. Lastly, I want to point out that the total annexation consists of 155 City Electric customers and 175 Carroll Electric customers. And you'll see that on the right hand of the screen as I go through the presentation.
Can you tell me how many,
Oh,
Carol?
I'm sorry, 175. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we are moving clockwise across the city to show the northeastern quadrant of the annexation area. As I previously mentioned, we're taking in both sides of Davidson Road, keeping as best as we can to the existing parcel lines, and also along the quarter section line, which keeps the proposed city limits as a clean line going along the north, and that's what I'm showing out there. So where we can everyone's property is either all in or all out. Not in every case, but in most of them. The areas to the east are remaining the same as what was presented before, with the exception of adding the corner on the southwest of the Hillcrest subdivision, and that's at the northeast corner of Highway 412 and Airport Road. So we added that little bit there. So here is the southeastern quadrant, which is where you'll see the most significant changes from what we presented previously. We heard from you that you wanted staff to look at squaring off the corners. We have interpreted that as taking in the areas north of Kenwood Street, including property owned by the school district. We also included property to the north that fills in the areas along Highway 412. We have met with the property owner on an unrelated matter, and they did not object to being included with the annexation. The box here, and I'll circle that, was intentionally left out because that property is currently in the process of petitioning to annex in the city. So we didn't want to get ahead of that particular annexation by double annexing it with this election. So that was left out intentionally. On a side note, if this ordinance is approved, we will no longer accept new annexations that are in the proposed area to avoid the issue of double annexing property. We're not wanting to take it in 2 times. And then moving here is looking at the southwest corner, and we've added the land. This is just to the north of the Woka Trail, where the parking is for that. Actually, the parking's to the north, and this area is taking into the south. This squares off that corner there.
And why wouldn't we just go straight to the state line and just square that whole southwest corner off?
We could have. We just chose. I mean, we just didn't do it. We just didn't do it. It was an attempt to try to avoid it ballooning too much. We didn't want the repeat of the 2008, where we just got so big and it was too much area. But we can consider that if we need to.
I don't want us to have a problem like we did in 2008.
Yeah.
Ben, if we back up to that square to the east of Highway 16 that you said is they're currently working on being annexed in, how can they do that? Because that would make them an island, and I thought we weren't allowed to have an island of city surrounded by county.
I drew in what that is. It's area to the south as well.
Okay,
it's going south of Keck Road.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
So it's actually filling in that little jog, but the whole thing is coming off of Highway 16.
Yes. So there's a little, I would call it like a snake or something that's kind of like an annexed area that's being left, so that there's no enclaves being created, like you're saying. But it creates a problem if one of these people tried to annex in here. They would create an enclave, everyone downstream of them. So this election, if it gets approved, would solve that whole problem with one swoop.
And then on that.
Sorry.
Directors, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let's let him go ahead and
Okay.
finish his presentation, and then you all can ask your questions,
Yep.
please. Thank you.
So yes, moving on, this is just looking at the stats of the utility customers. The chart summarizes what's happening. The key takeaways here is that there's 330 total customers. These are broken out by customers inside the city's electric territory and ones outside the territory. We believe that both customers inside and outside the city's electric territory are needing to be bought out from Carroll. So I would be remiss if I left out the future land use map. I'm showing this to give you a general idea of how this area will be zoned. As I mentioned in the memorandum that was included with this, it's too early at this stage to set the actual zone districts. If the annexation is approved by the voters, we will come back with a mass rezoning ordinance to rezone portions of this area as appropriate to the future land use map. As a placeholder, however, as this goes forward, all the land will come in initially as R2. That's the single-family residential zone, R2. And that will work actually for the majority of the area anyways. So we're really only going to have to chunk out the parts that don't really fit with the R2 designation. And then, of course, because we're also considering land to the south, I'm showing that area too. Again, with the majority of this land slated for the some form of residential development, with a few exceptions, such as the land owned by the school district, which I believe is right there. So on staff conclusions, the following is a summary of the facts on the annexation. The proposed services are standard, except that we're not including water or sewer. These will be added with development. This matches what the city did back in 2008. If approved, sanitation will go into effect starting with the first of next year, and electric will be fully switched over in 3 years' time on July the 1st, 2026. As I mentioned, the future land use map will be used as a primary guide for the future zoning, with R2 as the initial zone for all the area as it comes in. There's 175 Carroll customers, which is just over half the total annexed. When factoring the buyout costs, Carroll electric equipment, such as transmission lines, the costs for solid waste services, the amount is estimated just over $5 million, as you see in the figure underlined. This will be spaced out over several years, and the utility revenues from the existing and new utility customers in the territory will eventually offset this cost. Everyone in the city, as well as in the annexation territory, will be permitted to vote on the matter with a simple majority to determine the question as a yes or no on the ballot at the November 11th, 2023 election. The ordinance requires 3 readings. The readings cannot be combined. It is proposed with an emergency clause in order to have it go into effect from the for the cutoff date needed to get onto the November election cycle. The 2008 election was also passed with an emergency clause for the same reason. Finally, if the ordinance is approved, staff will conduct one public informational meeting summarizing what we basically presented today. We'll probably run that roughly 30 days prior to the election. The Planning Commission and Utility Commission reviewed the map with no comments, and staff recommends approval of the ordinance, and we're available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Directors, now questions. David?
Madam Mayor, thank you. Ben, I was just looking at that Exhibit A that has all of the additional annexed properties. There's one on the far, far east side that looks like, I guess you've tried to keep property boundaries, the lines of a piece of property, but there are some where it looks like it's cut in half where the line is. Is that normal to cut a piece in half? Part of it will be in and part of it won't?
Yeah, where we saw that mostly was along Davidson Road. And the reason for that was we had 2 criteria to put the line together. One was to keep to the quarter section, which is important because that helps not only with the legal description, but it kind of keeps everything contained within one area, so we're not having lots of lines of just jig-jagging up and down. But we also wanted to, where we could, move the line to be consistent with the parcel. So like if you look on Davidson Road, you do see like a part where right by the railroad where it does jump up a little bit. That's to stay with the parcel boundary as much as possible. So there are some instances where you're going to have that, but majority of the property is going to be within the city. There might be slivers or such north. And of course, those people could always petition to annex in later if they want the full property to come in. So
I'm looking at that Davidson Road. It almost looks like a housing addition that 2 lots are going to be left out of the addition, and that may not matter. But I had noticed the piece on the east side, that's just like a little jog that was cut off. And then Ron Ramsey will probably kill me, but have we talked to any of the people in Sycamore Heights? I mean, that's been talked about for years and years and years, but of course, over the years, they're like, no, we don't want to be. So, I don't know, it's on the northwest part
Yeah.
and some of the old growth city.
Yeah, I stayed away from that area for the same reasons. I've had various conversations with the neighbors in there over the years, and all of them been adamantly opposed to annexation. And we can consider it, but of course also there's the cost of those buyouts. So I'm trying to keep the cost as low as possible.
I
So,
don't
yeah.
want us to
Yeah.
run up against that big problem we
Yeah.
had in 2008. On your general costs page in your presentation, you mentioned city budget. If the annexation is approved, the cost would be slightly lower if customers do not ask for a 96-gallon roll cart. In terms of the area that is being annexed, I guess that's going to take a tremendous amount of planning to add personnel and trucks or whatever to take care of any sanitation, if there is that much. There may not be that much. But my question was, are the people that are paying an outside company now, what do we have to do? Do they just become a new sanitation customer?
I will answer that, but I also defer to our Public Works Director here who might answer better. But my understanding is, they have a service that they're paying for refuse pickup. They would just simply cancel that service, and then the city would pick them up on January 1.
I didn't know if you
Yeah.
give them an option or if they have to do it or what.
I don't know if we have the option. Do we?
I assumed if they are in the city, they've got to become a sanitation customer.
I would believe so, but again, I'm not the expert on that.
On his head, so I guess that's the way it is.
Our ordinances require that.
Yeah.
I just had caught that and had a question on it, so that's it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Ken.
Ben, it may be for the same reasons that you've already stated as to why, but I'm looking at the northwest area, right under City Lake. It kind of comes along, and then right at the corner, it drops and goes on to the west. Is there any particular reason other than not getting into the same issue we did once before, that we didn't just go up to connect to that area?
I believe you're talking about in section 19. Is that right? Where there's the part that's owned by
on Don Hill Road.
Yeah. One of the considerations too is we were really trying to be considerate to the city of Gentry, because if we keep going further and further north,
This is, we've got city, the line of the city right here, blank space, and then more city property.
Right.
And so would that not be prudent for us to look at that as well?
We could certainly. I mean, the reason it got so close was because of the late comment to add on both sides of Davidson Road, and so we were just looking at just doing that, not necessarily going further north than that directive. So
You're still losing me, because just to the east, it is farther north.
that's because we're taking both sides of the road, both sides of Davidson. So the Davidson doesn't continue
right. So
going
if we
to the
just
west.
continued to the west, it would just pretty much take in that area.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I guess, is that we didn't do that for something other than to avoid having a problem like we did the last time?
It was strictly, I was taking on both sides of Davidson Road because Davidson Road doesn't go to that area. We didn't look at it. So it wasn't an idea of just taking further and further north. We just wanted to take both sides of the road.
Okay.
That was the only reason we added going north of Davidson. It ended up being that there's that little gap there, but we just didn't say, let's go ahead and take that in. I mean, it's difficult when you do these annexations because where do you stop? I mean,
Right.
You take that, and then you want to take the next piece, and then the next piece, and
No, I understand that. I just thought
Yeah,
it
it's-
just made sense if we own the property to the north and we have that little stretch right there, and I understand being considerate of gentry and everything, but are they ever gonna try to get that?
well, not necessarily that they would get it. It would be the planning area boundary changes. So
But
we
you're
would
just saying
offset.
we would get that at a later time.
We could get it at a later time. That's correct. Yep.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mindy.
I know there are some people here tonight that will have a chance to talk in a minute, and I'd like to hear from them who are going to be impacted by this. So just a couple of things. If we could touch on some of the benefits that we think there may be to those people come into the city. That was a question that was asked. By the way, I gave some incorrect information about including water and wastewater. It very clearly says up there it does not include water and wastewater except for new development. So I just want to make sure I got that corrected from me. And then those that are here tonight, I don't know if it's because you got a notice. Did a notice go out to those that would be part? Is it possible to get a notice out to everybody so that they are aware of the next two readings?
Well, the part of the state statutes is that they have to put a notice in the newspaper before the election. So it's not for this ordinance. It would be as later down the
before the
road
election.
after the ordinance is passed.
And that
then
would be
there-
by newspaper, not by individual residents.
Correct. There's no requirement that we
Well, that
mail everyone, and we do have to identify all the voters within the area, and then that list is given to the election commission.
Okay.
So they know which ballots at each precinct would have the question.
Okay. I don't know if it might be helpful. Okay. But so back to the benefits, if we could just kind of touch on some of the benefits.
Well,
to those that would be annexed.
Yes, you would, as you see, the services provided: police, fire protection, code enforcement, animal control. You have sanitation. You'll be put on city electric, and you have street maintenance. There are zoning controls. I know some people don't like zoning, but it does also protect your property values. So while it might curtail what you are doing on your property, it also curtails what your neighbor's doing. So then that protects, what ends up getting built in some of these areas, because right now there isn't any control over what gets built out in the county.
Okay.
And I think that, for me, that's a very big benefit. You also have, the city board representative. Also, I think there's maybe a discount for the pool usage and just the city services that are already offered to the citizens.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a previous meeting, we had some concerns expressed by board members about sort of a forced annexation in another case. And you kind of explained the statute about and Betsy alluded to this a minute ago, about a property not being able to not be annexed if it's surrounded by annexation. So if you could just kind of remind us of that, because if this passes and we have citizens that are concerned about it, there wouldn't be much we could do if they are surrounded. If citizens within that area are surrounded, there wouldn't be much we could do.
Right. The annexation is a majority rule annexation. So all the citizens in Siloam Springs, as well as anyone living in the area, will vote, and then whatever gets most votes, that will be what will happen. And so now what you're talking about is a little separate situation where there's a petition. Say you have 5 owners, and 2 are against and 3 or 4. The 2 that are against are just going to be annexed in anyway, because it's a majority rule, but on a much smaller scale.
Right.
This is the same concept, but on a much, much larger scale, because we're looking at not just the area, but also the citizens themselves in the community that get to vote on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Betsy?
Madam Mayor, So another potential benefit would be is if all that's annexed in, we already know there's a lot of flooding issues through there. So then the city becomes responsible and will fix that. Is that accurate?
I believe we can do drainage projects. Is Kevin still here? He might speak up to that.
Just so you know, I am capable of other subjects, but
Kevin Moore, city engineer. Essentially, we would be taking on any drainage issues that are similar to what we're facing today. So anything that's a public issue, for instance, water coming off of a street onto a property in a way it's not supposed to, those would be the type of issues we'd be looking at. Anything property owner to property owner, those would still be civil matters that the city wouldn't likely get involved in.
but like I know you're aware where it comes across, it goes across the street and it's headed to that other subdivision. Would that be able to be taken care of by the city if they were in
Yes.
city limits?
Yes, so something like that at Oak Crest would be added to our project list.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Lisa?
I agree with Director Hunt. I know we haven't notified the individuals in that area, but I think it would be proactive if we notified them that we have 2 more readings. That way, if it ends up failing, we did our work on the front end, at least letting them know that this is coming to their vote. And so, is there a way to do that cost effectively?
Probably not cost effectively. It's over 300 people. We'd have to identify all the mailing addresses. I'm not sure when we'll be able to get that out, but possibly by the 3rd reading. I'm looking at the city clerk, see if that's something we can possibly do.
To identify who all of them are, and I think that would slow down the process to where we would not make the cutoff to meet the November 11th election, and it cost us additional money to hold a special election.
Well, you just said that you have to submit to the county the people that will be in that election area. So don't we already have that data?
Not right now, no. This has to get passed first, then we start collecting the data.
Have we done any Facebook posts? Have we done any, like, draw attention to it so citizens
We can
are
certainly
aware?
work with communications as to have that put out, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I would like citizens to be aware that we are having the conversation, so we know on the front end. Let's be proactive before we take it to the.
It doesn't take much to get a mailing list
Or what about
broken
something
down from the county.
Oh, sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
What about something like realtor type signs and just go with the information, potential annexation or board meeting, just the information and go stick them around in different places?
Like when land is going to be changed at the planning commission.
Yeah, we can
Lot of
do that. It'd be difficult to pit, we'll have to figure out what areas to put them in, because it's just such a large area. We don't have enough signs there that cover all of that, but
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
even like on some of the main roads.
Yeah.
And then if, hey, I saw the sign, tell their neighbor. I'd just trying to think of ways that might be more cost effective. Doesn't mean every single area is going to have a sign, but
we can certainly look into that, yeah.
Madam Mayor, so there's a meeting 30 days before the election, right?
Yeah, this is an informational meeting.
Informational.
yeah.
So at the very least, it seems we could maybe make sure, by then we would have the addresses, wouldn't we? And
Yes,
so maybe we
yes.
could send a mailer out at that
Mhm.
point to make sure.
I just thought it was a good time now because we're having the conversation now.
It is, but it sounds like that's
Right.
going to be a little bit more difficult. But the social media, you
Yeah,
could definitely
anything we
start
can
getting it out
do.
that way.
Bring attention to those citizens to be transparent.
It's not a problem to put out a postcard mailer by getting the mailing list from the county. I don't know why everybody's saying it's a problem. It's not a problem. Easily be done. Pardon?
Kevin,
No, it's not. It's easy to do. from the county, you get the mailing list.
I just want to make sure we communicate with people at this point, because this is a good time for them to have a conversation with
They
us.
deserve to be notified.
Kevin Moore, City Engineer. If I may, the mailing requirement for going into the vote is more stringent than that county list, so that's certainly something we could pull, but we have no way of guaranteeing that the addresses on the county will actually reach the owners of these properties. So I think also these 3 readings, while the public input is important, we know there will be people against this, and so it's important as a board to come to the decision of whether you wish this to move forward, knowing that there will be some opposition to this. So we'll be doing all that contact on the back end as required, notifying everybody, getting those mailing lists put together, because we have to notify the voting centers that those people will be coming. But as far as the additional inviting people in here, while of course we can do that, this is your portion of the decision, and then it will go to the public vote in November.
And I appreciate that, because we're going to have opposition no matter. But I still want to hear from them, whether
Right.
they agree or disagree, or I still want to hear from the citizens. It's important to me.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
when we look at the map that has the red outline is where our city electric service boundary is, correct? It says electric service boundary, meaning that's where we would provide electric right now.
That's where we provide our electric today.
Because
or
there's
supposed
electric
to.
customers that are down Airport Road that are outside the city limits and outside of our electric boundary. Why would there be electric customers that are not with GRDA that are down Airport Road? You see where I'm talking about, the northeast corner? That sliver?
Yes, there has been some encroachment on part of the city into Carroll Electric, and then also encroachment by Carroll Electric into the city.
Right.
There's been some give and take there.
I believe that we are not obligated, but I think any customers outside the city limits that are being provided city electric are fair game for us to ask to be annexed into the property, into the city limits. There are an awful lot in the northeast part of this annexation that are GRDA, and there's a lot of bare property farmland between that large group of GRDA customers and the city limits.
Carroll Electric.
Or Carroll.
Okay.
The big sliver that's just north down Don Hill Road, that's GRDA. Of course, we've always wondered how they got that, but you can't help but question, as you go down Don Hill Road, the entire northwest corner of that is the Wyrick Farm. It's a working cattle ranch. I don't know if they're going to want to be, and I wonder if all this property that's got only like one home on 20 acres, are they going to be? So I think we owe it to the people to at least give them the chance to speak. If we decide that it is in the best interest of the city as a whole to do it, then that's what we have to vote. But if they're going to be affected by it, we ought to let them speak and listen. As I've said, I was around in 2008 when this failed, the last one, and I don't want us to make mistakes again. And as Ken was saying, looking at this map, this one here, Kevin, that you've got, when you look at where City Lake is, it's city limits, but it's an island. As the kayak park is. I still don't understand to this day how we could put city limits out on an island that's miles south of the city limits currently. But why would we extend our annexation here within a stone's throw of City Lake and not connect it? I don't understand that, because it looks like there's several lots, housing lots along Don Hill that are between City Lake and this kind of catty corner from the section you've outlined to be annexed. And I don't understand why we would stop right there and not actually have what we already have as city limits annexed right up next to what we already own. It's just really odd where the line's been drawn.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Carol.
are there legal requirements of what we need to do to notify these citizens that we are entertaining this?
Kevin?
Yes, that's correct. So as Ben said, the requirement for notice comes going into the voting.
For the
portion,
election?
not
They
the
have to be
actual-
notified.
For the voting, not for the ordinance. That's correct.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Lisa.
I think it'll be in the newspaper next week, Mark. Hopefully on the front page, that will help, and hopefully we'll get feedback from that. Sometimes citizens know their environment better than, we don't know their environment. They know their environment, and so that's why I want their input, is to hear what they have to say about the environment they live in, and we're just guessing from the outside. And so that's why it's important to me that they have a voice here.
And may I clarify, are you as a board comfortable with staff doing this electronically rather than through mailing?
Doing what electronically?
Public notice for the next two
You
readings.
talking about via social media?
Yes.
Versus them being notified individually?
Correct, versus the mailers, because the mailers will come later, but to get that put together in time for it to go out, in time for the third reading,
How many homes are we talking again?
330.
I've walked neighborhoods, but I'm not walking to 330 people's houses.
I'll just say, I am for this annexation. I think you guys have drawn the lines well. I think it's needed. We've been behind the times. It's been 15 years since there's been a request to the public to annex. And I don't know, before 08 failed, I don't even know the one that actually, the last one before that would have passed. But we've got to keep up, and we've got to grow our city boundaries as part of just natural, what do you call it, organic growth that comes with a growing city. Especially one that's landlocked on the west by a state line and landlocked to the south basically by the Illinois River. So I am for this. I think it's proper. But on the other hand, in terms of notification, just because you don't have to do something doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. And I really don't understand why we would not be going the extra mile to alert every homeowner in this annexation place, all the yellow, of what the plan is. I mean, the time constraint doesn't make any sense. We've got 2 more readings, so we're at least 30 days away from the final vote. It doesn't make a lot of sense why we can't do the Facebook, social media, as well as a hard copy postcard mail out. You just put what you're going to put, you get it printed up,
Right.
run it through the post office like you do our billing.
Right, and we certainly can. Typically, with these notices, there are additional, we don't do certified mail. We do kind of one step below that where the postmaster stamps all the addresses that it was sent to. And that gives us some protection, but there's always the always the possibility that somebody could come back and say they didn't receive theirs in time.
But
And
the
so
fact that we have proof that we did it, we talked about it in this meeting, we decided to do it, the effort was put out by staff.
But there's no proof that you actually sent it to an individual. That's the situation. But I do believe in this annexation. But I think that the residents need to be notified I do think that they deserve to have a letter stating that this is happening. And I don't know why we can't have little real estate signs at the corners of some of these major streets saying this is what's going to take place on this particular date. That's the way I would hope that the citizens are notified.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Reed.
we have 330 people, but I think 155 of them are our city customers already. We could just put something in their building that would reduce it down to 175 that we would have to do a physical to.
Right.
Is that a bite that can be taken, or is that still a big bite?
Christina, is that?
I would agree that using the county mailing list that Director Allen suggested would be sufficient, as long as the board understands that those addresses may or may not be accurate. At least we have gone through the process of trying to notify the address.
So are you saying some have a mailing address and some have a physical address, so you'll send it to the physical instead of the mailing?
Correct. So, or somebody may be the owner that is absent, and so they may not necessarily live on their property.
So that's when you send it to the mailing, because people have, like, I have multiple properties, but my mailing address is consistent on all of them.
Correct. So we can
Send
get
it to
we can get the mailing list from the county. I'm just saying that it may not actually get to the owner.
But it's worth a try.
But it's worth it. I mean, as long as you're comfortable that that's a potential.
Communication is always helpful. It's always good to communicate.
I
Madam Mayor.
think as long as we've made an effort and we have done the best we can, that's all we can do, is the best we can with what we have available to us, which is the addresses from the county. But I still think if we put up signs at major intersections that say there is going to be a meeting, there's going to be an election, our citizens deserve to be notified one way or another. And
Before it goes to a vote of the people in November.
yes, and when you have them at major intersections, those little signs, I mean, people are going by there every day. And even if one person doesn't see it, their neighbor's going to see it, and they're going to bring it up to them. Did you see this? Are you aware that this is happening? Things get, you know how word of mouth goes.
Madam Mayor?
Matt?
Yes, David.
I do want to encourage you, Kevin, that we look at this again, the boundaries on City Lake, and attempt to connect City Lake to your proposed boundary.
We'll definitely look at that, and we'll have an answer for you at the next meeting.
It's too close not to connect it.
My recollection, so we looked at some of this area in 2014 or 2015, is that once you continue any further north on Hico Street, you have to pump the sewer back into the city. And so that was, even at that time, we were avoiding bringing Don Hill in. But I will confirm that prior to our next meeting.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Back to the notification, obviously I was interested in notifying, or I wouldn't have brought it up, and thank you for the further discussion on that, directors. And I agree, I think making the effort. But you asked the question, are we okay with just the social media? And I think you got your answer that we would like the written notification as well, but it's both and as far as I'm concerned, because we want to hear from those that are going to be impacted, but we also, but it's not only those outside of city limits. There are going to be people inside city limits that have a say on this as well, and we want to hear from them. So we obviously can't go through the process of sending notifications to everybody in town, but we want them to be able to weigh in on this as well. So both and, in my opinion.
Ben, did you have something?
I had a question. So if we have to change the legal description on the ordinance because we're adding additional areas, what does that do with the readings? I'm looking at Jay. Are we allowed to do that with the second reading, or does it have to be 3 readings with the final legal description?
My understanding is that the three readings, because they are required to be three separate readings and can't be combined, that they would all have to be the same. That can't change the boundaries from one to the next, but I would check on that to be sure.
The same as when we add a amendment between first and second, would it not be, Madam Mayor?
I would.
Because sometimes after the first reading, on the second reading, we'll add an amendment, and so it doesn't match the first reading, but we don't start over.
Right, and the only thing I would say is because there's a little bit of legal question whenever we're talking about an annexation as opposed to an amendment to an ordinance for city codes or that type of thing. There are some legal requirements that surround the annexation ordinance readings, is my understanding. Jay, is that correct?
Madam Mayor, that is correct. There are some special requirements that have to do with the readings for an annexation specifically, and so, like I said, that's why I want to check and be sure, and I'll
okay.
bring you
So
back an answer.
With that being said, then can we find that out? You'll check and find out about that, and then while we'll also then perhaps look at what the legal description would be for that area, so that if we can legally make that adjustment, we will be able to do that at the next meeting. We'll already have that in place.
We'll have the legal description.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we'll have the legal description added. Because there's an emergency clause on this, it has to be done by a certain date.
Right.
Or we miss the election entirely.
Exactly.
And we'd
And so
have
that's
to,
why we want to make sure we're ready. We've got that, but we want the legal opinion before we make that change.
right.
So, are we good with that, Christina? Jay, is that good? Okay. So, directors, is that acceptable to everyone to do it that way, to kind of do both things at the same time to make sure we are in compliance with the law? Okay. So, is there any other questions from the board?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Betsy.
And when you said social media and things, and on the city website, this might have included it. I get text message alerts and email alerts. Could for everybody who signed up for them, could this potential annexation also go on that to help alert people? Would that be an option?
I can check with Megan, but I do believe Code Red can do that within certain areas that are marked off by the user.
Okay, even if it went out to everybody, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. So, thank you.
One
Anyone
other
else?
thing, Madam Mayor.
Yes, David.
Ben, in your report, did you say the last date or the last meeting we can work on this is September 5th?
I believe that's the last date that we can send it out to the county as a certified ordinance. So I think it would be really tight with the first meeting in September, whether we can meet that deadline or not. I refer to the city clerk if you have any more to add on that.
We've got two more in August. That could be the second, third reading. I don't want that little sliver I was mentioning on City Lake, Madam Mayor, to hold us up on getting it on the 2023 ballot.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
So
work.
that's why I say we need to have it ready.
If we can do it on our own and Jay approves it, it's great, but it certainly isn't worth missing the vote date or the ballot date.
Right, and I think that is the direction that you understood, right, Ben? Okay. Anyone else? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address ordinance 23-19? Please come to the podium and state your name and address, if there is someone here.
Hello, Mark Miller, 22587 Westwood Drive, Siloam Springs, Arkansas. I'd like to read a little statement I have here, but I agree with David.
Bring the microphone up closer.
Sure.
Thank you.
I agree with David that there needs to be some kind of notification on this. You're talking about 330 homes, 150 something that are in the county. The city even has a website where we use to pull mailing lists for when planning changes, zoning and stuff like that to mail out. I don't know how far it extends extends north, but I know it includes us in Oakcrest. So that's going to cover the majority. It should be pretty easy to pull a mailing list. And there's a company that does it for 90, certified, or maybe it's the one through the post office for 90 cents a name. Okay, I'm against the annexation, if you haven't guessed. I'd like to read a little statement if I can get my phone to work. There's not much of a benefit to existing neighborhoods in the annexation of the city of Siloam Springs. If you look at our utilities in Benning County, I personally use Murray Trash Service. Murray Trash Service charges $25.80 a month for up to 5 bags, 30 pounds apiece. The city charges $27.82 for one trash can, for each trash can. Approximately 10% more for less service. Let's talk electric. Car Electric charges 13.4 cents a kilowatt hour, taxes included. The city alone charges 13.9 with a total of 15.4 cents per kilowatt because it's PCA or something. And I asked the utility, they weren't really, the billing, and they weren't really sure. They just said it was an electric charge. For the same kilowatt hour, or roughly 17% more. So my last month's electric bill of $144 would have been $168 in the city. If we use the same amount of electricity every month, it would amount to over $400 a year in additional costs in my electric alone. Then there's sewer. You noticed in his presentation there was no mention of the cost to add sewer to existing neighborhoods. It says during a new development, private enterprise. So when am I going to get sewer, even though I'd be in the city? It's going to be 10, 15 years at the earliest based on discussions with planning. And then there's no funding for it. So who's going to pay for it? It would be a great improvement. I'd love to have sewer. However, the cost and timeline as provided by existing neighborhoods is prohibitive, with a minimum of 10 and 15 years before the service would be provided. Next, let's talk about the cost of the annexation to the city. All these utility contracts would need to be bought out by the city. You saw $5 million. Wouldn't the money be better spent on improvements with the city? I know a year ago at a council meeting, the streets department mentioned they had something like $25 million in improvements that needed to be done to city streets, with a budget of about $1.5 million a year. There are several neighborhoods close to downtown that don't even have sidewalks yet. The city is looking into projects to replace existing water lines, which have become undersized and need a major replacement. Let's go back to electrical power for a moment. Adding all this means that our power grid will have to be upgraded, another cost factor. There's no incentive for those of us who are energy conscious and environmentally friendly to add solar power. I looked into it. I've discussed it with even the city attorney. But you can get net metering from the county. Someone mentioned, and I don't have the data to back this up, that if 12% of the Siloam Springs residents bought electric cars and plugged them in each night, our grid couldn't handle it. That's only 12% of the population. Right now we're 3%. I do have a question on the voting, and that is, shouldn't the people who are most affected by this be the only ones that vote on it? That's pretty much the gist of it. I'm here for any questions. I've got data if you'd like to, any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Is there anyone else?
Dylan Lee, 22530 Meadow Street, also part of the Northwest Quadrant here, Oakcrest. I've sent out Google Drives. I'm sure you've seen our neighborhood. One thing, for decades, we've been told that Oakcrest roads will be fixed by county, and we were on the books for that this year. They've came out, they've looked. That's going to most likely be delayed, and especially something like this. In that report, you mentioned that it's $18,000 a year for street maintenance, sanitation, and all the other stuff, that part of the budget. Our project alone, according to the county, was $46,000. Part of the road, which is Oakcrest, is deemed a total loss by the GIS map. So that is part of the reason that they have to go back and look at it, along with the flooding that covers our road. So 18,000, where's that going to happen? I mean, 50,000 is where they're just started at, and it's going to be more than that. And it's a little disheartening anytime we've dealt with the city when it comes to this stuff. It just kind of seems like we're going to rubber stamp some stuff, let alone with how this has gone. So this was told to be a goal for this year, and we're just now hearing it mid-year. The workshop, I was just lucky to be coming early to a board meeting that I heard about the workshop. So, and then the fact that we're basically using the emergency order to create a sense of urgency so that we can, it seems like the city and staff wanted to essentially rubber stamp it and not notify the folks that will be most affected by this. And that's a little disheartening. That's all I got.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jeff Farmer, 21923 Davidson Road. Now, I've been here so many times now, I think I could probably talk and not trip over my tongue. So let's, I've just got a few little questions. Congratulations, you've answered about every question I had written down here. But my question is, if this annex was to happen, who would represent us? Would we have a new ward? Would we have our own council member? Would we, what do we call them, board of directors? Would we have our own board of director? And my other question was about price on trash pickup. Marie does my trash pickup, and I heard a price right here, but I didn't hear it from any of the board members or anything. Are you going to make us not have private trash pickup and make us do city pickup? I guess that's my only question I got left. Oh, and also the annexed properties that comes in, they were going to designate them as an R2. And like my property is designated as an R1. Would mine change to an R2? And of course, I'm sure that probably changes my tax structure, what I have to pay taxes on real estate and even sales taxes on different things by being in the city limits. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Do we have answers to those questions tonight?
Well, yeah, I'm going to come back to the directors.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Powell, 14310 Country Club Road. My big question is what predicated the need to go to both sides of Davidson Road? The lines that you have drawn will divide our subdivision pretty much in half. Part of us will be in and part of us will be out of the city limits. And the other one is why is the rush? Why are we halfway through the year and we're going to try to rush to get this on the ballot in the fall? There'll be another election next year. It's been 15 years since you tried an annexation. And it appears that one of your biggest concerns is that it will fail like it did the last time. So what would be the problem in backing off and putting it on the ballot the next year? And then my last one is, several of us in the subdivision I'm in on 5 acres have livestock, lots of pets. Is that going to change anything for any of us?
That's a great question.
So that is a big thing. I don't see any real benefit being in the city. We have trash pickup, we have police, we have fire, we have ambulance, we have whatever we need. So those are the questions I have, and those are the questions that many in my community had as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hello. Eric Belecha, 21922 Davidson Road. Just want to let you guys know, if it wasn't for my front neighbor, I wouldn't know none of this was happening or this annexation stuff. The only reason I know about it is because of him. There's a lot of complaints that I have to do that I've been wanting to do, but I just I don't know who to contact. All that construction going on has been picking up a lot of dust. I believe in May 5th or May 2nd, it was said here that a water truck was going to be watering Davidson Road. I haven't seen no water truck. There's a lot of dust. I can't even go into my front yard without dust. I mean, it's just out of control right now, Davidson Road. Mr. David, I believe you go drive through there to go to Gentry. If you Davidson Road, as soon as you're going up the little hill, it's bad. Where when it rains, I need 4-wheel drive just to get in my house, and it's just the dirt road's getting out of control. That the dump trucks are having to speed up and go faster and faster. I had to report this today to the sheriff, telling them about the dump trucks going way too fast. That's why I was a little late to the board meeting today, and I just don't know what to do or who to contact. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Stephen Romig, 14196 Killarney Drive. And I'm speaking, some of my neighbors around are on this with us, and we really don't want to be annexed into the
Could you speak in the mic, Steve? Thank you.
Quite a few of our neighbors on Killarney don't want to be annexed into the city. We like the services we get from the county and the privileges, like one said, of animals and stuff. What happens if we get in, and what happens to our animals and livestock we have? And so that's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yes, my name is Ray Hines. I live at 475462 East 594 Road, Watts, Oklahoma. And I'm not in the area. But I wonder if somebody can address why it is that this needs to be voted on by all the citizens of Siloam Springs and not limited to those who are particularly affected, intimately affected by this vote. Because it would be easy for the people of Siloam Springs to believe that it's greatly to their benefit to have this property, in the city limits, without really being aware of the cost it would be to the people that are being annexed. So I would like if somebody could address that issue. And in terms of ability for the public to discern what's actually happening or being proposed, I would encourage, and this may be already something that would be obvious, but maybe some of these plats that clearly outline these areas so that would be posted on the city website so that people could be directed to come and look at this and see, am I included in this and where is it dividing? These particulars that we're trying to hash out in the board meeting could be considered by the people that would be of particular interest in understanding the particulars of it. So those are the two thoughts that I wanted to bring up and hope somebody can address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, then directors, I will come back to you. Yes, David.
Just to Ray's point there, just because all Siloam citizens can also vote on top of those who are being affected does not mean something's going to pass, because that's what happened in 2008, and it failed. And it was because the Planning Commission at the time decided to go well past Don Hill. The whole point was just to outline Don Hill and take in Don Hill, and the decision came to go beyond it out to Taylor Orchard Road, and enough people out there helped defeat it. I guess because not enough citizens in town understood. But there were a lot of people thought it was just gonna pass and it did not. So just because it's more than just the people affected does not mean something's definitely gonna pass.
Thank you. Anyone else?
And then,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and then I did want to say, this gentleman's right. We were told repeatedly that the developer on Davidson Road would be having a water truck daily to keep this dust down. We've had complaints on this before. The end of that street before it gets to Country Club, is already torn up going down that hill. It was torn up before the development began, and I could imagine the dump trucks have ripped it to pieces. And I think we need to hold that developer responsible, because we were promised that not only is the street going to be paved, but that the street would be kept to a minimum on dust by having a water truck. And to learn that the dump trucks are going too fast, we may need him to build up that street where it's such a mess. If there's any kind of rain, it's a mud pit. I've been on it. It's horrible. For Jeff, if this was annexed, there would be a board member currently that would be assigned, and it may be broken into two board members, the ones on the north side of town. I'm not sure, but there's not a new board member added, is what I'm saying. I'm not sure why Davidson Road was put in as both sides when it originally was only the south side. Ben, you may be able to explain that. You said someone on the planning and zoning requested it. But I appreciate the amount of people that did stand up here tonight and ask questions. These are the kind of questions that we need to be answering. I thought there was something else, but I can't remember. But Ben, maybe you can answer that on Davidson, why it took the north side as well.
Two reasons. It first came out with the Regional Planning Commission, who looks at these annexations, and it was at their recommendation to do both sides because of emergency services. It's not really good to do one side of a road to be in the city and the other side of the road be out, because the addressing is different. And when you're talking about saving lives, you really want to have everything as simple and copacetic as possible. And then secondly, there was a member on the Planning Commission that made the same comment, wasn't prompted to do so. It was totally independent, said they could put both sides of Davidson. So we followed on with that.
We've experienced that on Villa View for 30 years, where the north side, only sporadically has it been added, but for many, many years, the north side wasn't at all. And it was a question of, with our city services for emergency, well, are you on the north side of Villa View or on the south side?
Yeah,
So
it's just better.
I totally get what you're coming from.
Yeah, it's better practice for safety to have both sides of the street. I can address a few of the other things if you'd like me to. Or the gentleman that said he was an R1 and going, there's no zoning at all in the yellow area. They're outside of city limits. There's no zoning. They're not an R anything. So when they come in, it's R2, and that would be the first zone ever assigned to that property.
There's not something with the county where they're
No,
assigned
there's no R1 with it. Now, that might be a different designation of some kind, but that's nothing to do with zoning. The property taxes will go up by 5.5 mils, but they're not reassessed as more expensive just because you happen to be in the city. They're going to be looking at how the property is being used and assess based off of that, not, oh, well, you're in the city, you're going to have a higher assessment. At least I'm not aware of anything like that happening. Animals, there's plenty of animals in the city. There's farmland in the city, cattle. Let's look at what's on the south side of Sherry Whitlock. So there's, that's not going to be stopped just because you're taking in area. So,
And Madam Mayor, Ben,
Yes.
however, there is a limit to pets in city limits. You can only have 4 cats, dogs, whatever. I used to not live in city limits, and I had 5, 6, 7, 8 at a time. What happens if some of these people have more than 4 dogs, cats?
You were the
whatever?
cat lady everybody talked.
No, I was the dog lady,
Oh,
the
dog.
golden rescuer.
I can't answer that. It'd really be up to animal control to look into that, whether that's going to be an issue or not. I mean, if people can be grandfathered in, I mean, I would think that would be reasonable.
Yeah.
Does that
but-
grandfather carry, like, say I have 30 cattle, and
Cat lady.
cattle,
Oh,
cows,
okay.
Oh,
moo.
I thought you said cats too.
Cattle.
30 cats.
People process their cattle.
Yeah.
So when they get processed, those 30, can they bring 30 more in, or is it or when you grandfather, is it grandfathering what you currently have?
I would have to look into that and get back to you. I don't know animal control. It's not my area.
Jay, do you happen to know if that's,
Typically, grandfathering means you cannot expand upon the use that you have at the time of the ordinance change, in this case, the zoning. So if you have 30, probably continue to have 30 in perpetuity, but you couldn't add 31 or 32.
So limit,
No calves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes, some years you buy more than other. You're flexible, and if you look
Right.
at their records, if the year before they had 40, this year they have 30 because of there's a lot of variables. How do you?
Well, I'll just say there's nobody in the city that goes around counting heads of cattle. So I mean, it might be a complaint that there is somehow they've become a nuisance because there's so many or something, but it's not something that, I mean, the city's going to be looking to enforce just, by counting heads. I just don't see that happening.
Or, I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, or even that they're grandfathered in and it can vary within 25%, or, I don't know, that.
Do we set that grandfather? Is it set by? Who's it set by?
That could be something that the board could address by ordinance if it wants to. Right now, I don't believe there's anything that addresses that specifically. It's just the standard practice is that you just can't expand a grandfathered use. But I mean, if you want to do something specifically to address livestock, I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
I just don't see people being penalized because if that's your livelihood, if that's how you have cattle out there, I certainly wouldn't want my.
I mean, I would say that the cattle is dictated by the acreage. It's not an absolute number. So, like we said, we have cattle farms inside Siloam.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not,
So how do
as
we
long
do
as you
those
have the,
now? Because right now, like, you can only have so many cattle per acre, but you just said we have cattle farms, and there's a difference. So I could have, I think, 3 cattle on mine, and so.
I don't think the people in this area are going to be impacted by the annexation. They will continue the farm as they are doing today, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to come in and tell them they can't farm their cattle.
How do we protect that, though? We can say one thing.
I mean, the animal code is written by acreage as a standard practice of sanitation for animals. We don't say there's, an obscene number of cows on like a very, very small lot, like 7,000 square foot. We say you need to have at least several acres, and that would fall along with standard agricultural, horticultural practices. So I don't think, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think our code is prohibitive to farming in the county versus in the city. There's not a difference, if you follow what I'm saying, if you're a rancher or a cattle farmer.
Can I say one thing about my neighborhood? I live within the city limits, but my neighbors have cattle. So I know that happens. But I think that before they were brought into the city, they had cattle.
So they're allowed to have it.
Yeah.
and that doesn't change whenever they're annexed in?
If you came in with the agricultural zone, you'd be allowed to do agriculture. The only other part is Chapter 10, which is the animal code, which would, talks about how many swine, chickens, any type of farm animal. And I think that I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, obviously,
Yeah, I'm asking
but
you
I don't imagine that it's done in a way that's prohibitive to the farming practice, whether you're inside the city limits or outside the city limits.
I would like to know if inside our city limits code, when you look at the agriculture field, if they are recommended, is our code based off the recommendation of the agricultural field?
I would have to look into that. I don't know who developed the code. I would have to look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I think it would be more strict.
So you can bring back that information to us, Ben, at the next
Mhm.
meeting so that they'll have that information?
Yes.
Or perhaps have someone from animal control here?
I will research it thoroughly.
Yes,
Thank you.
perfect.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Betsy?
I think a lot of them have been covered, but a couple of things. As far as who would represent them, I assume is Mount Olive y'all's dividing line? Wouldn't it just continue with the two of you?
Mount
Gotta
Olive
be,
is the
it's gotta be
dividing line now.
divided by population.
You have to look at the
Okay.
population,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
They'll do a balance of all the population and divide it by 4.
We just redid it recently because it was imbalanced.
So the question's been asked more than once. Why the rush? Has this been in the works or planning for a while? I mean, I didn't know about it until the board meeting we discussed it.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Can I mention this? Because I started to say this a few minutes ago. This is something that was a board goal from a board that, from 2 or 3 years ago. In one of our planning sessions, this is something that was brought up as a board goal. And so staff is doing what the board requested of them a couple of years ago. Now we've got new people on the board. We're hearing from people that will be impacted by it. So who knows where we will go from here. But that's my understanding of this. And I was going to mention that before you asked the question. But then also, I just kind of wanted to remind people that when we vote tonight, if we vote in favor of the first reading, it will be because we're voting to continue to hear this for the next 2 readings. It doesn't necessarily mean we're voting one way or the other. So just so you know that, it's just voting to continue hearing about this and continue the discussion.
Anyone else? Directors?
Did that fully answer your question? And did I answer that question correctly?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe that's correct from what yes, that is correct.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I think one question that it got answered, but I don't think, from Mr. Farmer.
Okay.
The price on the trash pickup, are they required to have trash service? We said specifically the other, we didn't say specifically trash.
I think Christina.
Yes, the city ordinances require that if you live in city limits that you have trash pickup. I think that potentially when we talk to Megan about putting this online, we should field some of these questions online, because even though we charge more for our trash, most services don't do limb pickup, they don't do the twice a year,
Recycling.
and they don't do the recycling. So, I mean, there's more to the trash service than just picking up 30-pound bags. So,
Madam Mayor?
I think that's probably a good plan, is
Yeah,
to
that is a
answer some
great
of those
plan.
questions whenever you put that out there. Yes, Betsy?
I forgot earlier, sorry. The water truck, I remember, was supposed to go by. Can we do something to make sure
That's
that
what I was gonna
happens?
Kevin, can you address that? Have you talked to the contractor, or are you aware of that situation?
Kevin Moore, city engineer. Yes, I'll reach out to the contractor again, especially through these dry months. I have followed up with them the first couple times that this complaint was brought up, but had failed to do so since then, so I apologize.
Yeah, let them know that this board they told them that's what they would do, and this board is requesting that be done.
Will do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So, is there anything else, directors? If not, do I have a motion
I
to?
did
I'm
have
sorry.
one thing.
Yes, David.
Madam Mayor, Mark brought up several good points on 12% of our city population getting electric cars, our grid couldn't handle it. Was that just something you came up with on your own, or did you hear that somewhere, Mark?
I heard that a year ago.
Okay.
Okay. David, I believe Phil is here. If we could have him come
Okay.
to the podium and answer that question for us. At least he was, yes.
We've got 3% now, is what Mark said, that have electric cars.
Phil Stokes, Electric Director. Percentage-wise, I can't nail it down percentage-wise, but most cars are charged at night on level 2, and so we could easily handle that. The problem is your level 3 charging requires a lot more electricity, and so if we had a large amount of level 3 charging going on, we would have to adjust. We got plenty of capacity to do it. It would just be getting the infrastructure in, so it's not a problem.
What's level 2 versus level 3, Phil?
You have 3 levels on charging your cars, and level 1 is like just plugging into 110 outlet. Level 2 is your 240 volt outlet, and it, of course, it uses more electricity, but you can charge them quicker. Not all electric cars can handle the level 3 charging. Teslas can, but others can't. And level 3 is what you see mainly on interstates, where they come in and plug in, and they can charge within an hour, whereas level 2 takes several hours.
I do know that, versus the mentality that we all need to be driving electric cars because everything will be clean energy and our pollution won't be affecting the environment. There has to be power, and if we don't have enough electricity to provide everyone, then there's no use in everyone getting electric cars. So when you have brownouts and blackouts in some states, it's kind of ridiculous. And I didn't know what percentage we were, Mark, so that's a good number to know that we're at 3%. But it's good to know we have the capacity as well to accept more in the future. It'd be near impossible to go to 100%. Because electricity does cost fossil fuels, people. It really does.
David.
I got from the state.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Madam Mayor, I would like to move. May I
Yes.
go ahead and make a motion?
Yes.
I think we're done here. I'd like to move that we place the annexation election issue on its first reading.
Ordinance 23-19 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Carroll.
Yes.
Blair.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Wiles.
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Bristler.
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is, I'm sorry, Christina, left you out.
Ordinance number 23-19, an ordinance submitting to the voters of the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and other affected persons the question of annexation to said city of Siloam Springs, certain contiguous territory, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Christina. Next is our resolution 41-23, Safe Streets for All, Vision Zero Declaration. Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Kevin Moore, City Engineer. Regional Planning has hired Tool Design Group to put together a Vision Zero plan for our region, which is the goal that there will be 0 deaths on the roadways within the next 15 years. Their study ranged from 2017 to 2021. During that time, there were 220 fatal accidents in just the 2-county area and a little over 1,100 serious injury accidents in that same time period. A couple kind of terminology shifts this plan also makes. First of all, referring to wrecks as crashes instead of accidents. It's important to recognize that some crashes are the result of design flaws or weather or different circumstances that would result in a vehicle crashing, not simply an accident on the part of the driver. Speed has a lot to do with fatalities in accidents. The difference between 20 and 40 miles per hour is 13 to 73%. So anything over 30 miles an hour gets very dangerous for vulnerable road users. That's your cyclists, your pedestrians, and your motorcyclists. So during that 2017 to 2021 study period, 3% of the crashes in the area involved those vulnerable users. Again, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. But they made up 33% of the deaths and serious injuries in the area. So part of what we're trying to do is address this disproportion in what we're seeing in wrecks. So the Federal Highway Administration has come up with the safe system approach. There are some portions of this that are kind of outside of our scope. Of course, we're not involved in making vehicles safer, things like that. But there's some overlap with post-crash care and things where first responders having additional capabilities as well as healthcare and things like that. And then the speeds, of course, that we can control, and our goals for pedestrians on the sidewalk, getting them off the road, that we can control. This is a map of our area, 2017 to 2021. The red dots are fatal or serious injury crashes, and then the black dots are other reported incidents where an incident report was filed. Within just the city, this is the pedestrian crash map. And then again for cyclists, same years. Again for motorcycles, starting to see some of that increase. And then motor vehicles. So part of what they've done with this plan is put together a high injury network. So they have identified areas that receive a disproportionate amount of wrecks in general, but also serious injury wrecks. So serious injury or fatalities were given a 3 times multiplier. They counted 3 times a minor accident. And so going through these areas, we have largely 412, of course, and then Progress in 16, that Kenwood area, and Sherry Whitlock. Those are the areas that have been identified. These numbers that you see here are project numbers throughout the region. So the red, for instance, the very east side of town, 1-12 is high priority project number 12 in the 2-county area. This is not just construction. I think it's important to know that there are countermeasures that are recommended, but there are no specific projects that have been designed that we're required to implement as part of this plan. So moving forward, there will be things like public outreach, teaching people the importance of pushing the button on a flashing beacon. A lot of people, only about 30% of people push that button, but it stops 98% of vehicles when those lights are actually flashing. So increasing the number of people that know to stop and push it, it's not going to trigger on its own. Things like that are very important. We'll also be looking at projects to improve these areas and at policies and design changes moving forward into the future to make sure that we have safer streets to begin with as the city grows. These are a couple countermeasures that the Federal Highway Administration has put together. They've done studies on the reduced crashes that some of these things provide, as well as reductions to injuries, reductions to crashes at night. Things like variable speed limits, having control over faster roads to lower the speed limit in times of poor weather or congestion, or if there's a crash already ahead of the driver, can reduce rear end collisions by over 60%, and it can reduce serious injury and fatal incidents by 51% just by that on its own. Some other things worth mentioning, safety edge being important to prevent somebody whose tire falls off the side of the road from losing control of the vehicle. Allows your streets to be more recoverable. Retroreflective back plates. You'll see these on a lot of the newer signals moving forward. They'll have the yellow bar around behind the signal. It's important for contrast. It can help you identify, especially if lights are lined up in a sequence, you can tell which one's closer to you by the size of that back plate, more so than just the size of the light. So if you're driving into town, a good example would be driving west into town. The lights on Highway 412 at 59 and at Progress can blend together, especially at night. And so this also gives colorblind people some additional reference, so you can tell based on where the light is in that reflection, whether it's the top red light or the bottom green light, especially at night. That's really important, and it's a hard distinction for colorblind people to make. And then during power outages, you can also tell where the signal is at because the back plate lights up. So simple things like that can be added to a lot of our streetlights and provide a 15% reduction in total crashes right off the bat based on these numbers. Additional things, providing lighting at crosswalks. It doesn't even have to be additional lighting. In a lot of cases, just providing it in front of the pedestrians so that they're not silhouetted can make a huge difference, up to 42% crash reduction. Again, those flashing beacons, they'll stop about 98% of cars, and they've been shown to reduce crashes by 47%. And a lot of those as well are people that have slammed on the brakes and are then rear-ended, so they're stopping those crashes as well because more than one vehicle can see those lights flashing. And then simple things like friction management on pavement, giving people additional friction to come to a stop at an intersection or make a curve at speed safely, things like that. So again, no projects have been designed or required as part of this. There is funding available through the Federal Highway Administration, and that targets cities and regions that have adopted a plan similar to this. So that is typically an 80-20 match like a lot of our other funding through regional planning. But we would be looking at, over the coming years, implementing a lot of those countermeasures. And some of them will be construction projects in general, but again, it's not limited to just major construction projects. A lot of these solutions are simple and can be implemented. The policy I included as well was not provided by regional planning. That's a draft of something that I came up with that we could pass in order to stress the importance that a sidewalk stays off the side of the road to begin with. And so a lot of projects, even projects designed by the city, we've been putting the sidewalk directly up against the curb simply because we don't have the right of way. And I think that's a mistake because moving forward, that's essentially where the sidewalk is always going to be. So it's worth it to deal with the utility conflict or purchase the extra right of way that you need to get that sidewalk separated from the street to begin with, so that it always provides adequate protection for pedestrians. With that, staff's available for any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Directors?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, David.
I make a motion that we table this until we have a full-time city administrator in his position and let him decide to bring this back to us at a future date.
We have a motion to table this resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table. Roll call.
Blair,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Wiles,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Motion to table is approved. Thank you, Kevin. And apparently, Christina, you've heard the direction of this motion that this will be brought back after we have our city administrator in place. Thank you very much for your information and your time. So with that, we will move to staff reports. Ben, short-term rentals code update.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Board. I'm back. As you know, we've looked at the regulations for short-term rentals for nearly a year now. This effort went on pause during the recent legislative session due to a potential law that would have impacted the implementation of short-term rental regulations. That law was never approved, so we're back to the status where cities can now regulate these uses. Since that time, staff has taken a fresh look at short-term rentals, taking the city of Hot Springs, Arkansas as an example, as recommended by the Arkansas Municipal League. Our current proposal takes this out of the zoning code and regulates them through the business code. This is similar to what the Hot Springs approach. It also removes the requirement for a special use permit for each of these applications, which has somewhat bogged down the approval process, lasting several months. We heard you on streamlining the approval process. So the current model allows staff to review the permits and issue them within 1 or 2 weeks. but the applicant would be required to set up notice to the neighbors for at least 30 days after the permit's approved. So this allows any interested party, such as a neighbor, or to challenge the permit should there be concerns or neighborhood issues with the short-term rental. Once only challenge permits would be required to be taken to the Board of Adjustment for consideration using the issues brought up by the challenging party. The challenging party would be required to apply for appeals application and due notice. The Board of Adjustment would either vote to confirm the permit or vote to overturn it. The short-term rental applicant would be taking on the risk if choosing to start their operations during the appeal window, that 30-day window after approval. With the exception of the appeals process, the permitting in this matter would be similar to how we are approving food trucks, RV parks, and general business licenses, which also includes home-based businesses. As short-term rentals are a business use, we feel this would be appropriate in area to accommodate these in the business code. One of the key issues raised with these permits is the volume, or how many does the city need to have. This is a primary reason why cities are regulating these, as they do deplete the city's housing stock, converting homes from residential use to visitor occupancy. So we're suggesting putting a cap of no more than 25 per year to be implemented the start of the year. This would be 100 permits in a 4-year period. We feel that this is a fair number and it allows the city's housing stock to recover, so there's not a net decrease in housing. Excuse me. Anyone who applies for the 25th permit, or after that 25th permit is issued, would need to wait to the following year on January 1st to apply. We typically do not see more than 25 of these permits a year. I do have the figures if you want to know the exact amount. So we don't believe that this cap is going to really impact anybody immediately. So in addition to that, some of the same regulations that we presented to you last time would still apply. The limits of occupancy, safety inspections, parking, concentration of short-term rentals within a certain area. All the safeguards that we have been talking about would still be in place. So in closing, staff is seeking your direction with proceeding with this final ordinance along this outline. This would be presented to the Planning Commission and the board later on this year for your review. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Directors?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Currently, I appreciate that our code protects the neighborhoods, and that's what it's about. And we actually, my husband and I went through the Airbnb process and for Siloam, and we've sold that property, so I can now have a say on this. But I do want to go back to you mentioned it, and I brought it anyway because I was going to mention it. I want to go back. It was a Senate Bill 197, and it passed the Senate in February. In May 1st, it died in the House committee. But this is what the bill says, and it says Arkansans have a constitutional right to use their property without intrusion by the government. Short-term rentals are vital to the tourism and marketability of the state, and local governments often hold back tourism and infringe on property owners' private property rights in the state by passing ordinances that inhibit property owners' rights to use their property as they see fit. So the bill did pass the Senate with a large, there was very few people that voted against it. And like I said, it died in the House committee, but we would be lying to ourselves if we didn't say this bill is not going to come back. And it's going to keep coming back, and it's going to keep coming back because it affects tourism in Siloam, in the state of Arkansas.
But what is the point of the bill? Is it to?
It's to prevent local governments from telling property owners for short-term rentals how to use their property. And so it's a private, you own your home, and it says, it gives a good example in here. Arkansas Constitution, Article 221 establishes that no person shall be taken or imprisoned or deceased of his estate, freehold, liberties, or privileges, or outlawed, or in any manner destroyed or deprived of his life, liberty, or property, except by the judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Nor shall any person under any circumstance be exiled from the state. And so what they're saying is that it's a private property, and we're saying it's a business, the way we put it in our code, are we not?
That's what we're suggesting, yeah.
Yeah. But it's the same as, actually, it's safer if you look at, if I look at, we have rental and we have Airbnbs. Our Airbnbs are safer than our rentals, because when I go to let somebody stay in my Airbnb, I do a thorough check on them because the application allows me to do that. And so if they don't have a history in there, I'm not letting them stay in my property. And I can do a background check, but it's not stored in one place and you miss things on my rentals. So sometimes we get bad neighbors in there, and we don't want bad neighbors. That's what we want to prevent, and I know that's where your heart is. And so for me, I think this bill is going to keep coming forward, and for me, I agree with this bill. So that's where I stand.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Betsy.
I had a resident in my ward who, I guess the concern would be that we would have more than 25. It's their family home. Their parents passed away, and the only way they can hold on to it until their kids are old enough or whatever is to do short-term rentals with it, and that's really important to them. I would just hate for people like that not to be able to keep their family home if we had a limit like that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor, Ben, was there a time when we were considering limiting it to a percentage of the number of homes?
Yes.
And so this is a little different but the same. We're still limiting.
It's less restrictive.
Less restrictive.
Far less restrictive, yeah, because originally it was 1% of the housing stock, and once you got to that 1%, you're out of luck. You can't go past that.
And you're saying that for how many years in a row have we had around 25 a year? Do you know total how many short-term rentals we have?
Yeah, we've got, the first year we had 13, second year we did 13, and now we're at 4.
So we've really only been doing this for about 3 years now.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you say we're up 4?
We have 4 in 2023.
That's all? Just
That's
4?
it. Because we put a pause due to this Senate bill.
okay.
Yeah.
So we have 30 total short-term rentals in town?
If the 3 that are under consideration, if they get approved, that would be the 30th. Yes. Now some of them have no longer an operation.
Right.
But
right.
there were 30 permits that have been issued.
And we had them before we put some code in place.
30 permits in 3 years.
Yeah, so the 25 a year is planning on an expansion. We don't anticipate anyone really getting that many.
Right.
But it just in case, because you could get a corporation in here, buys up a whole neighborhood, and they want to turn the entire neighborhood into short-term rentals, we wouldn't have anything way to stop them.
Yep.
And so we're trying to protect the citizens and the city by having this regulation.
And I've wondered about somebody coming in and getting 5 of them or 10 of them.
Yeah.
There's no limit to like one person getting.
We have them 5 in a row, then there's no neighborhood anymore.
How long is a permit for?
The permit just goes for, it would be, as long as they're in operation, yeah.
Like an initial.
Yeah. It's a special use, we call them special use permits now. They require to go to the planning commission board. What we're suggesting is to make them more like a business license. So the staff would approve it. It would be a 2-week review. Then there's the notice to the neighbors just to protect the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
and then that would be it. You know, it's a much lower bar of entry for short-term rental than what we currently have on the books now. Currently, we're a lot more restrictive now
Are they
than what we're suggesting. Yeah.
I mean, are they inspected by the city at all?
Yes, that would be part of the regulations. I said what we're doing right now, I can't speak to all our inspections, but we would be putting in regulations that state that they need to be inspected.
And then are they inspected yearly?
I can look into that, whether it's a yearly.
So are you suggesting that they would become like a business license where they would be renewed every year, or it be like a business license but still only be a one-time?
The one time for the special use permit, the business license renews. We require to renew.
You want to switch it to like a business license where it's renewed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is, just so you understand, this is supposed to be less regulation what we're proposing than what
So you're saying right now how many can the city approve a year?
we don't have a cap right
Okay,
now.
but you're adding a cap, so it's
We're
not less
suggesting a
restrictive.
cap,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's
25.
not less restrictive. But the last time we had this up, our room was full of people, if anybody can remember, of people that have Airbnbs that spoke up about it and about the restrictions, because some people, this is their livelihood, this is their business.
There were some from Fayetteville.
And so we don't go into Walmart and say, you can only sell so many T-shirts. It's the same difference. We're telling people you can only have so many Airbnbs, or especially when you're in the real estate market, you either got to turn that house around, or if you're going to make it a business, you got to be able to make it a business quickly, not a year from now or 2 years from now.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I think a couple of years ago, one of the reasons why we had a lot of the owners here was because of the tax issue. We weren't getting the taxes that we were supposed to be. Airbnb was supposed to be giving them like VRBO did, or vice versa. And did we get all that squared away?
That's all been squared away. Yeah.
Okay. And then we've talked about grandfathering in. So if you're going to make this a business license that they're going to have to renew every year, how does that affect the people that are already Airbnb owners or short-term rental owners? Will they have to start paying, even though when they first got their license or whatever it was to do that, they didn't have to?
All the short-term rentals are supposed to have business licenses today.
Okay, so those 30 that we already have,
They should have business licenses, yes.
Okay, so I thought this making them like a business and
It's additional, yeah, it's an additional permit. So you have the business license permit, and then there's an additional permit that's for short-term rental. Okay, so this is suggesting a add-on permit.
Well, I guess the question is there anything additional the current short-term rental owners would have to do that they're not having to do now? Okay.
No, they're grandfathered in.
Okay.
So they're having to get a business license?
Yes.
And get the short-term rental permit?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was just the short-term rental.
No, right now, we require them to get special use permit. Now, also, not to muddy the waters, but this is only for the residential zone. So if you're talking about the downtown commercial, they're not getting the special use permit. So the ones that are like the residential houses that are, in a R2 zone, as of right now, it's a zoning use unit that we require the special use permit that then goes through the planning commission and to the city board for final approval. You'll be getting, I think, 3 more in a couple of months.
Well, you may have covered it and I didn't see it. Did the number of 25 you've got, I mean, we're not even close to that yet. Did you learn like how many Hot Springs has or Bella Vista has?
Oh yeah, they have far more because they're tourist communities. I think they had a cap of like 100 a year or something like that.
Or is it in a percentage? It's a
this is based off the Hot Springs model. Yeah.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Betsy.
You had said it's more restrictive right now. Can you tell me how it's more restrictive or how it would be less restrictive?
Well, right now, if you want to do a short-term rental, you have to apply for a special use permit application. Then you have to do legal notification for that, sending letters to everyone within 300 feet. You have to place an ad in the newspaper. There has to be a sign put out on your property. Then you have to wait for your staff review. Then you're scheduled to a planning commission meeting. That's the following month, so that's about 30 to 40 days later after you apply. First of all, you can only apply at the beginning of the month. You can't apply any other time. It has to be the beginning of the month. Then after planning commission, then you have to wait to the next available board meeting, which would be the following month after planning commission. So it follow kind of similar to how we're doing other planning permits, like preliminary plat or some other. I'm trying not rezonings because those are 3 readings, but similar to that, where something goes to the planning commission and then has to then be forwarded to the board for review. So what we're suggesting is making it a staff level approval, but with the option for a complaining party to bring that to a board, in this case the Board of Adjustment, to get the neighbors together and vote on whether that staff made the right decision, I guess, on granting the short-term rental permit.
Yes. So I did have somebody that does Airbnbs contact me, and one of the statements in your memorandum says the primary concern on STRs operating in residential neighborhoods, not ones operating in mixed-use areas such as Broadway Street, and you did bring up that it's the residential areas. So you're only wanting to do this for the residential areas and not Broadway Street? They will not have the same restrictions?
I believe that's how we were going to write that ordinance, but I'll have to double check, make sure that, that would be only the residential areas primarily that we get the special permit. But yeah, we can obviously amend that to include everybody if we want to, or it's just the residentials.
I just feel like if we're going to do it for one, we got to do it for all.
Yeah,
to be fair.
that makes sense. Yeah.
And we can always eliminate the ordinances that are here. And if this bill keeps going forward, which I know it is because I talked to some of these senators and they're going to keep introducing this bill, I would like to. I want to make sure anything we do, whatever is decided, I want to make sure it's fair. So if you're going to do it from one area, you do it for all the areas.
Okay.
Kevin?
Kevin Moore, city engineer. I think the only clarification I would add to that is the reason it's a special use permit is that the short-term rental business is not a use by right within the residential zone. So that's why it's not been included in certain commercial areas.
Can you explain that?
So based on the zoning of your home or your business determines what you can do by right within our code. And so there are some overlaps where a special use is required in order to go outside what is already allowed. And then there are some things, of course, that aren't allowed at all. But the reason you're seeing special use only for residential is because turning it into a business that's no longer only a residential.
So I thought the reason we introduced it is because the special use is for the tax, because of the hotel motel tax.
I can't speak to why. That's why it's only going before you as the residential portion rather than, because there's no special use tied to Airbnb within commercial. Because it's a use by right.
Area, they can do an Airbnb and they don't have to go through the same process as the right.
If they're zoned for it already, then they can do it as a business license. There's no additional requirement.
Because they're zoned commercial.
Because they're zoned for that type of business.
Anyone else? Then, do I have a motion? No, we don't have anything to really vote on. We just need direction for Ben. So, directors, what is your pleasure? Do we want Ben to continue to put this together as an ordinance or a resolution, I guess?
It would actually be an ordinance because we're talking about code changes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, do you want him to put that together and bring that back to you for your consideration?
I do.
Yes? Okay. Ken?
Yes.
Yes? Betsy? Okay.
Mine's no.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
David?
I don't know if we need to regulate the number, because I do tend to agree with what Lisa was saying on the state law. But I will say, when Mr. Patterson brought this to us, that we were not properly collecting taxes, I was in full support, because I said, I don't think hotels and motels should be required to be doing something that people that are basically doing the same thing as a hotel motel should be paying a tax to the city. I just don't know how much we should be overly regulating. I would like to see what is proposed, or options for proposal, but not necessarily much change from what we do now, besides like the business license.
So I think that that's what he's asking, if
Yeah.
he would like for him to put that together and let you all then look at that and see what he's proposing in the ordinance.
So, excuse me, when it goes through the Senate, the House, will that then override whatever ordinance we do?
Yes, I would say that it would. Jay, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So Ben, I think you have direction then that they would like for you to put that together and bring that back to them in the form of an ordinance, which of course will require 3 readings. Christina?
As a point of clarification,
Yes.
if the board's issue is just the number, cap number, and not the process change, then that is something that we could do the process change without a cap number, if that is what the board prefers.
My biggest concern
I
would
got
be that, that current Airbnb owners or short-term rental owners would be negatively impacted, but I think you answered that they would not. And that I think I'm hearing you say this process that you're proposing is a simpler process for future short-term rental owners. And so then to Christina's question, if the issue is the cap, we don't have to have a cap necessarily.
And that is my issue, because I think we put too much, we're trying to govern too much.
I got confused by what Christina said.
I agree with, I appreciate you saying that too.
I think what she said is, if the issue for the board is the cap, if that's part of the issue, that the cap could be removed from the
Or
language in the
changed.
ordinance, or changed.
Yeah, you could go
Yes.
25 to 30 or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, and we can take the cap out, just so you understand the reason for the cap was that cities, because of the housing crisis, there's a limited number of housing units, and every short-term rental that comes up, that's a one more house that a family can live in.
Yeah.
And so
It's a great
if it
point.
goes unchecked without any cap, it could cause some serious problems. And there are cities that are very concerned about the number of units, housing units, that are just no longer available for people trying to move into the community. So that's the reason for the cap.
And then you mentioned something else about a developer could potentially come in and buy up a bunch in one neighborhood.
That's correct.
Trying to think of how that scenario would work. I mean, there's not a neighborhood where all the houses are going to go up for sale at the same time. So what would be that
And they would
scenario?
be competing against themselves.
I get them all the time. I will buy your house. And so it's a
Foxtail.
mass mailing, and they just.
Yeah.
Then everybody
they-
at the same time decides they'll sell their house?
What if you get some? That
Oh, if you send it out to 1,000 people and you get 20.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go in the
Enough
circular
money for
file
it.
at my house.
It's just,
me enough, I would sell mine.
it introduces the potential for problems, especially if you have like along one block, say you have 3 or 4 or 5 all on an area. Nobody's living there. You know, it's not a neighborhood. It's really just a motel.
No, I think that's valid. I'm glad you brought it
So-
up. That's why I'm saying, yes,
Yeah.
we could eliminate the cap, but then again, we're opening ourselves up to what you're
But we
talking
can
about.
make it to 30 a year or a 35. I mean, that's no problem on us.
And if we set a number and we get too close to that number and have complaints, we can adjust it in 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
But,
always.
but I certainly sympathize with where you're coming from, Ben, that, I mean, you mentioned that this is different than a home rental, which is 6 months or more. I'd rather have somebody renting a home for 6 months than somebody renting it for the weekend. But you will have people come in and buy for cash 5 homes, and all of a sudden, that's their business. That is their cash flow for the next 10 years. And they'll buy with that cash flow additional homes. And all of a sudden, instead of residents, we've got, I shouldn't say transients, but we've got people that don't live permanently. And that's not what we want Siloam to be.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we don't govern too much.
I'm
And I think that bill
agreement
is
on that.
protecting people, the government governing too much. Because it is private property. It's
Yeah.
not it is a business, but it's not a business. They could easily stop the Airbnb and move into their home. And so I thought the only reason we even did the process is to get the tax. So.
Right, that you're right. That was the original.
And it is, I'd rather have somebody rent my Airbnb because they take care of your property compared to people that rent your property. I know, I experience it every day. I've been doing it for 5 years. And so people take care of your property when they go into an Airbnb. And those people are gonna be good neighbors.
Maybe we have a rule that someone can only do so many per year. Because like we were saying, we don't want somebody to come in and do 10 in a.
In fact, didn't you say 2? One person would be limited to 2 per year?
We were proposing, I did print out the regulations we were proposing, but we did actually have a limit on entities, or individuals that they could not have more than one, or only a limit on how many, to prevent like the corporation effect where, if there was a, they would.
So is that going to be part of the ordinance that you're going to be bringing?
That was
back
part
to
of the suggested
So
changes. Yeah.
Can we have him, just give him the direction to put
Yeah.
that ordinance together?
Yeah.
And then we'll have this discussion and make any changes that you all
Yes.
want to do at that time.
Yes.
Is that acceptable,
agree to
Christina
that.
and
It's
Ben?
it's
Yes.
become an industry. It
Yes.
really has.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you will move forward with that and then bring that back to the board.
We will. Thank you.
Very much, Ben. All right, Christina, Administrator's Report.
So there are no purchases in excess of $30,000 that are not related to Resolution 3423. And those purchases include $98,456.25 for 17 25 kVA pad mount transformers, and $68,729.48 for material to cover substation equipment. This month's fourth Friday is Art Fest. It will be held July 28th and is sponsored by the Siloam Springs Center for the Arts. In addition to vendors and food trucks, there will be artists, caricaturists, and live music. So Parks and Recreation is also hosting a theater camp for ages 10 through 17 beginning the week of July 31st. Campers can register through the city's website. As a point of direction, one director has requested drainage maps within the board packet. These have been added to our presentations but have not historically been in the packet. Does the board as a whole want to have these maps added? If we do that, then we'll go ahead and add them to the Planning Commission as well, and we'll begin that practice with the next agenda.
Question, are you just talking about the drainage for that area of that project?
Correct.
You're just talking about whatever project's coming before us,
Correct.
that the drainage map be included.
Yes.
So I think she's asking for direction at this point, so I will just ask each of you, would you like to have that included? Yes?
I don't necessarily need it if it's shared with us at the meetings.
Okay. Ken?
Yes.
Betsy? Yes? Yes? Reed? Yes? Carol?
I don't need it until we have our meeting.
Okay. And David?
Well, if it's part of the overall proposal that's in our packet of info that we're going to get regarding the project, simply because drainage has been such a hot topic for us for a couple years, if it's included in the rest of the information, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
So I think that's your
I think it would
direction,
be
that yes, they
helpful.
would like that.
Yes. And finally, the American Legion's Post 29's annual carnival will be July 19th through the 23rd on East Highway 412, just north of Quarter Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that was here tonight, and thank you, staff, for your presentations and your info to the board. We appreciate that very much and the hard work you do for us and our citizens. So with that, I will come to the board for your reports, and Mindy, we will start with you, and David, we will end with you.
Okay. Excited to see the theater camp. My daughter used to participate that, and that was always a lot of fun for her. And Fourth Friday, again, if you haven't been to one, I encourage you to go. I've been to the first two. Lots of fun, good vendors, good food. Great job by, again, the Chamber, Main Street, the City of Siloam. It's just a great collaborative effort that has been very well received by many citizens who have come out. If you haven't had a chance to go to the Woka Trail, please go to the Woka Trail. Very, very neat trail. I've been on it a couple of times, of course, at the opening, but then again, last Saturday, I rode my bike down, and several people were walking and riding, and that was fairly early on a Saturday morning, so I expect as the word gets out, we will have a lot of visitors to Siloam Springs, and then especially when the water park opens. So it's just a beautiful trail, very well done. Lastly, we got an email, the board all got an email recently from a citizen who had been downtown to visit and on a Saturday, and was concerned that so several of the businesses were closed, and she enjoyed coming to Siloam, but just wanted to be able to go to some of the stores and restaurants. And so I forwarded her email on to our Main Street director, because I knew she had lots of contact with the downtown business owners. And then I started looking up the hours on my own, and just wanted to share with the board, since we all got that email, I was actually able to find 24 different establishments between boutiques and places to shop downtown and eateries downtown that all had Saturday hours. So I don't know if it was just sort of an off day that this particular resident was there, but I know there was some concern among board members, and most of our downtown businesses, whether they sell goods or provide services or provide food, do have Saturday hours, anywhere from 8 in the morning to restaurants up to 8 or 9 at night. So I just want to make sure all the board members had that information. And if we can just encourage people to take advantage of our downtown businesses, I think it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy.
And other businesses. Obviously, there are lots of other businesses in town. So if you are from outside of Siloam and you come to our downtown area, make sure you visit the other areas in town too. We've got lots of neat places to go.
Ken?
Couple things real quick. It's good to see the new people in the fire department. Always good to have new and happy faces. Gentlemen, you got the lion's share of everything tonight. Stellar job. Thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Betsy?
Yeah, y'all did a great job, as always. Thank you. And yeah, getting to spend lots of time together. But I appreciate all you're doing. I wanted to correct something I said last time when I was talking about maintenance, that they have a $10,000 gas bill. There was some confusion over that. It's $1,400 to $2,700 a month, but they do seriously need insulation. They're working on bids, so that's going to come before us in the future. Yeah, we need to do what we can for them. Superintendent Armetta and the mechanics do an awesome job taking care of 442 vehicles. So that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Lisa?
You guys did a great job. I always appreciate you. Even if I give you a hard time, I appreciate you. I had the privilege to have lunch with the sanitation department today, and they are a great group of individuals. I really enjoyed getting to know them and the services that we have. And I just want to promote the recycling. and my family uses it, and we recycle. And I asked them today, well, how can I help you help me with that service? And they said, well, if you could separate it, that would really make our job a lot easier. And so that's so simple for me. And they're like, well, you can even take some more bins to help separate. So I got some more bins to help separate it out. And so I just want to encourage anybody that if you're recycling, or if you haven't recycled and you want to start recycling, go to sanitation. And a lot of times city employees only hear the negative, but I encourage you to let them hear the positive. Even if we disagree, we can agree to disagree, and we can also let them know they're good people doing a good job. And so I really appreciated that opportunity to spend time with them. And tomorrow I get to spend time with fleet maintenance, and I'm looking forward to that. And so, but I do have one question. Is the air condition broken here?
That's a good question. Christina, are we working?
I can feel the air coming down, but it's not very cold.
It is working. It's not working well.
No.
We'll have Cliff look at that.
Thank you. That it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I figured everybody would like to know that answer.
That's
'cause
right.
It's hot in here.
Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking forward to what's going to be happening within our community concerning the smart growth. I look forward to seeing how that is implemented and put forth into our community, and how we can be able to enjoy living here. The fourth Fridays that we've been seeing, I think, are a real benefit to the community. I think if you have not been, it would be to your benefit to attend. It's good to see a collaborative effort and a show of unity amongst our people in the community as we step forward in still post-pandemic. We can show a sign of unity, which just builds a community. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Reed. Carol?
I appreciate everybody that came out tonight. It's always nice to have our citizens come, and we can see their faces. I appreciate that. I want to thank Ben and Kevin for the workshop that they gave. Very informative. Also, Ben, for the short-term rental update. It's just becoming more and more, it seems like people are going towards that. Thank you, Arthur, for your quarterly report. I appreciated that. And thank you to all of our staff. We have the best employees in the city of Siloam Springs, and I do appreciate that. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Carol. David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was really impressed to see this is 2 meetings in a row with so many new hires of our fire department. And sometimes I think they're embarrassed to be here, but you know, the smiles on their face being recognized, I'm appreciative to see them being introduced at our meetings. And it's great that we have interest to make the extra effort to apply and become part of the fire department. I mean, so many people, young people, it's their dream job, and I'm excited to see the interest in it. I appreciate Arthur for letting us know what the chamber's been doing, and the many connections he's got that he can help the city when we need him. I was very concerned that this board was informed, and I want staff to follow up, please, on this Davidson Road water truck. We were affirmed that this was going to be happening. Those people that have lived down there forever are really being abused by this amount of dust, especially with this heat. And I don't like to see developers get away with stuff that they've assured and promised our city that they're going to do. On top of that, I will address another housing addition across from First Baptist Church. I brought this up to staff a couple times already, and nothing's been done. But across the street, this housing addition that has been going in from the very beginning, destroyed part of our city sidewalk, have now covered up all the rest of the sidewalk with big piles of dirt And there are people that depend upon that sidewalk for their walking. There's a lot of people that walk downhill, and they now have to get out in the street. It's not nice. It's not helpful to them. And these piles of dirt didn't need to be there, and they've just been put there by the developer and left. And it's frustrating to drive by and see this. And it's been at least 2 months, if not longer, that this dirt has been covering up our sidewalk. Not to mention the huge entryway that they destroyed our sidewalk and didn't even put anything down but some rough gravel for their trucks to drive over. So I think we got to be looking out for our citizens that use our streets and sidewalks every day. And this one, the developers are really taking advantage of, and I hope we can make them clean that up and expose the sidewalk again. On the downtown visitor, that person, I reached out to them again. They had been here just that previous Saturday, and they come once a month. And there are many of our stores that are only open till noon on Saturday. And apparently, she must not have been here when they were open, but it was something that, she was making. I guess everybody saw the email that she was making a point that you would want people to be able to come in and expect your downtown, as beautiful it is, that the stores are open. The presentations tonight on the annex. Of course, I was appreciative of the workshop we had on the annexation, but the proposal tonight was professionally done, very nicely done, and the smart growth presentation, I want to congratulate Ben and Kevin. They've done great jobs on these two, and I appreciate the info. It's obvious the future thinking, the forward thinking these two gentlemen have and care for the city's growth that they put into these presentations. It's stuff that we all have to consider and look at and make decisions on, and they've tried to be thorough, and I really appreciate it, and it means a lot. And then email I'd gotten with Christina regarding the downtown East Main project. Christina, you'd said something about the bridge needs to be replaced and its weight limits. Is it unsafe? Should it be closed now?
No, it is unsafe for certain weight limits. And so they've put weight limits on it, but at some point we are just going to have to replace that bridge.
Well, I admit to ask you that before, and I hadn't, and I was just like, that's something we all need to be aware of. If it's something that we need to do, like if it's about to collapse, we need to deal with it now rather than sooner rather than later.
No, it was just a grant opportunity.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that's all I have.
So, David,
let me just make sure.
And whenever you make sure, before you make your motion to adjourn, I do have a request from Lisa for one more comments before you make that.
Go ahead.
I just want to say congratulations to Alan Gilbert instead of Chief Gilbert. We have now signed a contract, and Alan Gilbert will be our new city administrator. And I've had people say, really? You already picked somebody? I didn't know that. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's kind of been in the news. But we had a special meeting to do the contract, I think.
It was in the newspaper.
Yeah, people should have known.
But I want to say congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, Chief. It's going to be hard for us not to keep calling him Chief. I mean, you're the chief of the city, but you're not the police chief anymore. After you assign someone else, we'll have to get used to not calling you Chief.
Yeah, and thank you, Christina, for everything that you've done.
Yep.
It is greatly appreciated.
Yep. Okay. So
as I said last time, she's not done yet.
That's right.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Thank you.